It was a command wire, and the Afghani army had torn apart the command wire for us. They were like, we know there's jugs underneath there. And we're like, all right, time to go earn the pay. I had my little mini metal detector with me because they had been known to lay anti-personnel landmines. And so I go and I crawl under this tunnel. And all of a sudden, this thing, and it had like 1,000 legs, crawls over my hand and up my sleeve.
Welcome to the Echo Oscar Delta podcast, where we talk to Navy EOD techs and hear the stories that they want to share. All ideas, thoughts, and statements are those of the guest and the host of Echo Oscar Delta, and not of Navy EOD or Navy as a whole. All right, today we have Tara Asbury. She was a Master Chief in EOD, retired just recently. Did 5 deployments, 1 on a ship, 4 EOD deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and a couple to Africa. Appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me, Zadron. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. This episode's sponsors are the Navy Special Operations Foundation is the only foundation that exists to exclusively serve the men and women and the families of the Navy Special Operations community. NSOF exists to ensure that our operators and their families are provided with all the tools necessary to overcome any challenges they face and to ensure that they are never alone in the fight. To learn more about the organization, request support, or make donations, please visit nsof.org. So you did a ship deployment first, so that means you had a regular Navy job, it sounds like.
Yeah. So when I came in, I was a gunner's mate.
Okay.
And I came in July of 2000, right after high school, and went to, typical boot camp, GMA school, GMC school. So I was a VLS technician. And when I got to my boat, USS Shiloh, we did a wonderful 9.5-month deployment.
Oh, sounds fun.
We found out New Year's Day of 2002 or 2003 that we were being extended. So we were turning around and going back. So Happy New Year.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it was. It actually pretty was terrible. And we were part of the initial launch into Iraq. So our ship, we launched 65 Tomahawks.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Most of them were obviously at night, and there was a couple day ones. So actually getting to see the missile come out of the launcher during the day was a unique experience.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we came home from that, and it's nice to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long were you out before you got turned back around?
We were heading home. So we had just stopped in Guam, and we were heading to Hawaii. And so we were literally just maybe 3 or 4 weeks out from being home. Because they were doing what was called I don't know if you ever heard of a Tiger Cruise, where you bring your family on. Mm-hmm. And so a couple of my family members they had tickets going out to Hawaii. And then we found out, we woke up with our captain announcing like, hey, congratulations, happy I forget if it was 2003. And he was like, good news is it's a new year. Bad news is we just got word that we were part of the Abraham Lincoln battle group, the one where Bush came on, was like, oh yeah, but it really wasn't.
Yeah.
So we were part of that battle group.
Gotcha. So, yeah. Nice. Is that where you found out about EOD?
So I found out about EOD when we were deployed during that. They had a team on board the Lincoln, and they were putting out to other ships in the battle group that they were doing tryouts. And my buddy in my division, he was trying out for it. So that's where I first heard about EOD. I didn't hear about EOD. I didn't really know much about it at the time. So how that came about was when I was up for orders. So I made E5 on the boat, and then when we got back from our deployment, I think I was on the ship for maybe another year. I can't remember. It's been so long. Yeah. And I'd been an E5 for 2 years then. And so it was the classic, like, we didn't have enough E6s. We didn't have enough E3s, but we had too many E5s at the time because all the guys from deployment had made rank. Mm-hmm. And so they were like, hey, you have to leave 6 months early. And at the time, the only thing that was available was for GM2 was you could go to Guam and be a gate guard,
Nice.
or you could go and get your armor NEC and go to a mobile unit.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, well, I had the VLS NEC. I was like, that's pretty cool. I was like, let me go get my 08. Back then it was called 0812. And so I chose to take the orders to get another NEC and then go to the mobile unit. And so I went through that pipeline, and then I went to mobile unit 3, and I was a gunner's mate at mobile unit 3.
Nice.
And then that's when I learned the true world of EOD and how different EOD is from regular Navy.
Right.
So yeah.
Nice. That's pretty good setup then.
Yeah.
When you were at the mobile unit as a GM there, was it pretty easy to put in the package to go?
Yes, it was easy. So the guy in my division at mobile unit 3, him and I, we decided. So let me back up. So being a gunner's mate there, we would get phone calls. You'd have the duty phone, and so if guys were flying in from deployment or wherever they were coming in from, wherever, you'd go and you pick up your weapons and you'd put it in the armory, or we would drive the demo up to China Lake, and so that's how we got to experience and see everything that was going on. And my buddy and I, we realized like, hey, this is way better than ship life.
Yeah.
And they're actually doing stuff. Like at the time, mobile unit 3 was very busy. I mean, back then they called them detachments. They weren't called platoons. And to see these detachments just constantly turning and burning, like guys would come back from Iraq, and within a month they were already doing their next workup cycle. And so that particular mobile unit was very busy in Iraq.
Yeah.
I can't speak for any other MOEs, but I just know that those guys were very busy. And so I liked that this job I felt was doing more for the war effort than sitting on a big gray boat.
Yeah.
No offense to anybody who sits on a big gray boat, but just, I was like, okay, I've done that. That was all right. But this looked like, wow, these guys are out there and you're working on IEDs and you're helping people, you're saving people. And it wasn't so much it wasn't the like glory of it. It was just like, this job is something that looks very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I also like the fact that the EOD community, physical fitness is a huge factor into it. And being on a ship at the time really wasn't.
Yeah. Go figure.
Yeah. And unfortunately at the time I kind of had a ship bod, so it was a good workout program for me too. But my buddy and I, he couldn't swim and I couldn't run. And
perfect
so,
team.
Yeah, we were a perfect team. And so, and I hate running. I've always hated running. I know there's a lot of people in this community that love running. I'm a swimmer. I grew up swimming, competitive swimming.
Yeah.
And so, I taught him how to swim and he taught me how to run. And so we did everything together, and it was easy to get your package put together there, and I wasn't really officially a part of their PSI program because I worked there. But in the morning and at lunch, I was required to do the workouts that the PSIs did. But then, the rest of the workday, I was a gunner's mate doing that job.
What years was that?
03 to 06.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I actually PSI'd at mobile unit 3 in 2007.
Yeah.
So I just missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They definitely had a PSI program.
Yeah.
That was it was good. Got you in shape.
It did. Yeah.
So then you went to school. How'd school go for you? Was it?
School went good. I have no problem saying I was not the best runner in the class.
Yeah.
I was actually pretty excited. So our class was the last class to go through without the prep. The prep course was the very next course after me.
Gotcha.
After our class. And at the time when I showed up, I was not the worst runner. There were two other guys there that were worse runners than me.
Yeah.
And I remember during PSI, they was like, you don't want to be the last. You don't want to be the worst at anything. And so I was like, yes, I'm not the worst runner. And then unfortunately, those two ended up dropping. And I was like, no. I struggled with running. I was always the last one. And I was in a class of we had a bunch of officers, and it was hilarious because a lot of them were track,
Oh, really?
and so I could see them get frustrated with me, and I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, you have like the legs of a gazelle. You're
Right.
you're like 6'2" and a $120. Like I'm 5'2". Like your one stride is like 6 strides to me.
Yeah.
So running was interesting. I held my own in the water though, growing up swimming. So when we did our first bay swim, it was hilarious because I came in second, and the instructor at the time, he just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I was like, you cheated. And I was like, no, I swear to God, I didn't cheat. And it was hilarious because he had me hold on to the side of his kayak, and then he gathered all the other guys in the class, and they all encircled me, and he was like, it's obviously very inappropriate now, but circa early 2000s.
Yeah.
He was like, I can't believe this fucking hatchet wound beat all of you. What kind of men do you think you are? And I sat there and I was like, what's a hatchet wound? And then it clicked, and I was like, oh, So,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. So swimming was my one, saving grace.
Yeah.
But it went well. And then on to EOD school, and same, EOD school, so academic
Yeah.
that, what was it, every day, every other day, you're averaging a test. Mm-hmm. So
It's terrible.
it always sucked when you had like the test on the Friday.
Right.
So, EOD school went well. It was interesting. I got put as the LPO of the class because I was a first class so I had made first class right before EOD school. And right before I had made first class, before I went to dive school, it was the big, well, we don't know if we want any more first classes going through. So I remember worrying if my orders were going to get canceled, and I was grandfathered in. Ground was hilarious. It's where I got my first real like ass chewing as the LPO of the class because we got done for the day, and the guy, he comes in at the time, and great guy, he's retired now, but he comes in, he's like, Geiske, he's like, why the fuck are your dudes out there playing baseball on the prac field? And I was like, what are you talking about? And I go out there and hear like a couple of my classmates had made anti-tank landmines as the bases and was using a rocket, and the grenade was the baseball. And like, how do you not laugh at
That's
that?
awesome, actually. Yeah.
How do you not laugh at that? But then you get pulled into the office and your ass is getting chewed, and like, I'm trying not to laugh, and then I have to go out there and I'm like, hey guys, so we can't do this, So definitely good moments. Definitely good moments with that.
I feel like that setup, that should be a like Friday sports day event where you have anti-tank landmines. Yes. That would be amazing.
It was it was pretty good. So there was that, and then I rolled. I have no problem saying that. And then I rolled into another class, and it was funny because when I rolled into the next, I got in surface class, then you get done with that, and then I had to wait for the next Navy class to meet up in underwater. And it was hilarious because when we met them, I mean, we knew them, I knew them, but when you officially joined the class, there was another first class, and he was like, hey, I just want to let you know that I am the LPO, and I was like, bro, like,
you can
got
have
it. Like, I am just here, like, you can have it. And he was like, well, I was like, hey man, like, don't gotta tell me twice.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Did you get put on a team right away?
I did. Oh, nice. Yes. So I showed up to Mobile Unit 1, and I was put on a what we would call nowadays a MO platoon.
Yeah.
And we started our workup right away.
Nice. Mm-hmm. That's good. I know, like I was pretty quick, but I got to the mobile unit and there wasn't a team. So then I crushed it in R&T.
Oh, nice.
Building up devices. And then we went through
watching drills.
And then it was around the time when I got there and I was in it, that they had somebody, I won't say who, a mobile unit, we'll just say that, had confused the cap, inert versus real.
Oh.
And that incident happened.
Okay.
And so then we had to inventory every piece of
Oh.
inert ordnance that we
That
had.
was fun.
Oh, it was amazing.
Trying to find all of them in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly. And then somewhere in that process is when a team stood up and I got on that, and I was sad I couldn't finish it out with
Right,
the
yeah.
rest of the R&T crew, but I had to go.
Right.
But
make that sacrifice.
yeah, but no, that's good. Getting right on the team and then starting the workup. During the workup, school, I feel like a lot of times the way I looked at school, obviously after I'd done real EOD for a while, is school is really the test on can you learn the EOD stuff,
Right.
and then you get to the mobile unit and then you actually learn
Right.
EOD.
Yes.
Going through your first workup, how was that versus what you thought it was going to be from learning in school?
It was very different.
Yeah.
We were fortunate. So going back to the West Coast, going to the training unit, and then the members who were in my platoon at the time had all been to Iraq.
Okay.
And so they had the experience. And then going
Nice.
to 2-1, you had the experience of EOD techs in Iraq. And so it was very realistic training.
Nice.
It was as real as it could get, because I think the only person on our platoon that hadn't been there maybe was our LPO.
Yeah.
I think because he was a prior diver.
Okay. You guys go up to China Lake during the
We
workup
do.
several times?
Yes.
Or
How it was back then was you would go for your RAV, for your
okay.
FEP,
Yep.
but you went up 2 weeks before and you did your shooting course. That's when you would do your, what we call now ISIS, ACES nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And then you did your week up there.
Okay.
And the RAV, your FEP, whatever you want to call it, was very different from what we do now.
Yeah. I remember I got to go up there one time when I was PSI and kind of help,
Set up.
quote unquote, help set up. Really, I just did push-ups while other people were setting stuff up. But yeah, even now, I think that having China Lake as that training area and being able to use real explosives
Yes.
as part of the drills and everything, that is an awesome benefit.
Yes, it was. You couldn't match that anywhere else. So when to fast forward, a couple years later, when I came to the East Coast and I did my first stint at 2-2 in my first FEP, I was in shock.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was taking a step backwards because China Lake was so advanced and was as realistic as you could get for Iraq or Afghanistan at
Right.
the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice having everything so close
Yes.
here, but definitely disadvantages with
Yes.
the
Pros and
using
cons
real.
to
Yeah.
pros and cons to both sides.
Yeah. Getting and going out the door on your first deployment, how was that?
It was interesting. I had great teammates. Both of so I was on a 3-man team,
Okay.
and my other 2 teammates, they were both team leaders, but they were also completely different.
Yeah.
And one was very relaxed and calm, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I just want you to drive the robot down there and tell me what you see." Where the other one was about as high strung, like you could give him a piece of coal and he'd shit a diamond, And so it would depend on the day of who was the team leader. I'd have to it was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde,
Yeah.
switching my mind. So I'm like, okay, I know, this is how, because you get in your flow,
Right.
right? Like any team that you're on, whether it's a 2-man team, 4-man team, 3-man team, whatever you want,
Yep.
you get in your flow. But with them, I had a style for one, and then I had a style for another.
Yeah.
But it was good. We trained all the time. We would come back from a drill, and whether we did amazing, whether we did good, whether we just did or whether we just completely bombed it, we would sit down, the 3 of us, and we would go over hey, here was my perspective, here is his perspective, and here is my perspective. And if there was a time where I sucked on the robot, I knew when we got back, my ass was getting on that robot.
Yeah.
Because they're like, nope. And so I'll never forget, we got one drill, and I was never a gamer. I've never, been into stuff like that. And so naturally, people who are gamers were very talented naturally.
Yeah.
And so it took a lot of training. And I remember there was this one drill we came back from, and my one teammate, he was just pissed. And he was like, can't believe you performed like that. That was embarrassing. And I was embarrassed too. You know what I mean? And they really pulled the whole dad, so ashamed. Like, I'm so disappointed in you. And he was like, sit on the couch. Because we were in this, at Moby one time, we were in this huge bay, this huge open bay. And he was like, sit on the couch. We're going to go down, drink some Subway. And we're going to come back and we're going to do some stuff. And I was like, okay. And what he did was he waited till nighttime and he threw out all these objects. And he was like, all right, now take this robot and go down and find all the objects with this robot. And so I took the Talon down. I did, because everything's different at night, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, all right, sweet, we're done. And he was like, all right, now get the packbot out. And I was like, damn it. You're going home at 1:30 in the morning, because, but it made me a better robot driver.
Right.
You don't look at it then. Mm-hmm. You don't see it that way then, I always felt like, oh man, I'm getting picked on because I suck or but what was awesome about it is by the time deployment came, I don't want to say we were ready for deployment, but mm-hmm. obviously through a combat deployment, you grow stronger in all of your, robot driving, team leader, whatever your bit was,
right?
You got better at it, and then we became the economy of motion was just like boom, 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 because you knew what to expect.
Right. Yeah, that's always interesting. It's the team dynamic is interesting because you do have to. I always think back to, as you go and get higher in leadership, right? You might finish with one team and you had an SOP or an ERP on how you did something.
Yes.
And then you start working with your next team and you're like, why is it not there?
Yeah, yes.
And you're like, oh.
It's hard not to compare.
Exactly. Yes. And then I've even found that just like you had to kind of shift how you worked with the team leader that you run, as the team leader, you have to understand that not everybody is in the same place. And so maybe what you do at step one is actually what you used to do, or what you do at step two is actually what you do at step one now. Yes. Move things around. It's interesting. It's very personality dependent. It
is. It's very personality because, we had one guy, one team leader, my super relaxed, control. He would listen to, we'd go, we'd get our information. And so how it would be is we'd get the call. And so they'd be like, all right, Tara, go get the truck ready. So I'd go and I'd turn the truck on and I'd go get the batteries and, you make sure the radios are good, make sure, the robot's charged, getting everything set up. So then when they came out, we huddled together and we talked about hey, here's a 9-line, go over. All right. And then we'd go and meet up with our, oh man.
Your security?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so then we'd have our little meeting with security and then we would roll out. And it was hilarious because the guy who was super relaxed, he would play the heaviest death metal possible, and you're sitting down, you're like, all right, but then when he would talk to you, it was just so chill. And
yeah.
and then my other team leader would come in and he's playing fucking Katy Perry.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there, you're like, this is what we're listening to right now. And then he's like, why aren't you doing this? Do this. Hey, drive over here. Make sure you have this, and it was so completely opposite.
Yeah.
So, but good times.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Things that give you those fond memories, though.
It does. Oh no, it does. Looking back, and I remember him putting on Katy Perry, and I'm like, wow, this is what we're listening to right now. Driving down in the middle of Iraq, you're like, okay, all right, you kissed a girl and you liked it,
Yeah, right.
And he's up there singing, and you're just in the back like, all right,
this is happening. On that deployment, did you have any incidents or things that memorable or?
Well, obviously, the most memorable would be my first IED.
Yeah.
So we had that within, I'd say, the first week of being there, week and a half of being there. I don't remember the exact timeline, but I know it was very quickly. And it was hilarious because it was at night. And so, before you deploy, you picture oh, I could go this way or I could go that way, And all during training, you always heard you're going to get this 9-line and they're going to tell you what it is. And then you're going to show up and it's going to be completely different of what they said it was. And that's what it was. It was something completely different. And it was nighttime and it was like sprinkling, And so, you're anxious, you're nervous, you're excited, the adrenaline's pumping because you're finally going out the wire. You're finally doing what you just spent the past 2-3 years of your life, whatever deployment is for you doing. And so getting the call and going, and, dropping the robot and sending the robot down, it was exciting. You find the item. And I remember, I was like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. All right, place a charge. We get, you go down, you find the item, you get pictures of the item, and then you place your charge. And in my mind, I was like, whew, damn, that was good. And the security team was comes over and they're like, please feel free to go at a glacier's pace. And I was like, wah, wah, wah,
Oh, that's harsh.
Yeah. But in your mind, you're like, I did that.
Yeah.
That was pretty smooth. And then you heard that and it was like, sad face,
I'm sure though too, security had probably already been in country for years.
So that
not
was
years,
at the time when Army was doing
year and a half,
18-month deployment. So I think we were, I cannot remember if that was that deployment or the Afghanistan deployment was when they changed out. So they were on their third. I don't know if we were their second or their third EOD team. So
they're used to the EOD team that had been there for 6 months.
We're in and out in 30 minutes,
Just like you said, you grow throughout the time there. So,
yes.
I know we try on MOB team and really on every team to give a little bit of all the things that could happen during your workup. Did you do any of that kind of stuff where you had something in your mind of, okay, this is what I should expect when we go out and do that? Or did you mainly just focus on just roadside after roadside because that's where you went?
No. So at the time with Training 2-1, you did everything.
Okay.
You did everything. It wasn't so much, oh, you're just going to do roadsides. We did everything.
Nice.
I mean, I worked with ODA. We did a flyaways with the Pathfinder units. So it was a very well-rounded deployment as far as exposure to different scenarios that could happen and actually did happen. And you would think, oh, I don't think we would do that. And then next thing you know, you're doing it.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Being able to do some of those little bit different than what your normal day-to-day is, kind of break it up a little bit.
It was because, when you live in a truck, as we would put it, right, you have all this space, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go and you do a flyaway with a different unit. And, and I know guys who do NSOF deployments are used to doing stuff but, you literally pack up what you can in your backpack and that's it. That's all you have. Yep. And so that was very interesting to learn that aspect and see how, okay, I'm not going to pack this, or I am going to pack this, or, I do need this, or I don't have the comfort of an up-armored vehicle,
Right.
It was a different style and it was very eye-opening.
So I know that the way my kit looks now is it looks like I wouldn't be able to go out and do anything. Vice, my first deployment, it looked like I could take care of anything and everything that would happen. When you went out with the ODA, did you pack
differently?
Correct. Well, I don't want to say correctly because there's not a correct, but
differently.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. So I remember, even during our workup, showing up and doing our first drill together, one guy, he was like, okay, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need this. And it's like, oh, all right, I thought we needed all that, And then, you go and then you do a different style drill and they're like, well, why don't you have that? I'm like, well, you said we didn't need that, And so, so we were I was always evolving and changing, my gear.
Yeah.
And that was fun because you think as the new guy, you think you know it and you don't. And so having your two teammates reminding you what you were doing wrong was interesting. So, but no, from being in the truck to being with ODA to even going to do that flyaway, it was different.
After you did all those on your first deployment, did you have a version that you preferred, or did you like just being able to have that variety?
I liked having the variety. I liked knowing. So I'd have my bags set in so I'm very like organized. So I'd have my bags and I would write down like, hey, fly. And I think everybody in the community does. It's not just me. So obviously like I had my like fly away, or I had my, hey, this is this bag. This is, you have your chem bag, you have your, this setup, you have that set up. And so it was, it was just packed nicely in my 1660, just boom, there it is. So, and then coming back and then training for the next platoon, you think you have it all together, and then you're doing a completely different mission. You're like, well, shit,
Yeah. All of that's wasted.
Yes. But it worked at the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Speaking of coming back, when you came back, transitioning back, were you gone for about 6 months?
We were gone for, let's see here. We left, I think we were gone for 7.5, 8.
After you got back and started rolling into your next workup, how did it feel having that deployment under that full workup, that deployment under you, and now you're doing another workup?
It felt great. You come back from your first deployment and you're on top of the world, right? And you want more. You want more. You want more calls. You want more scenarios that you had been in, because as exciting or as scary as it might be, there's just I can't describe it. It's just it's a great feeling. You crave it. Yeah. In a sense. And so I was excited to go back and deploy. And at the time, our platoon was to be I think we were going to go to Jeb Fuge, and then it had changed 6 months prior, and then we were told we were going to go to Afghanistan. Okay.
Was everybody excited, or?
Oh yes, everyone was excited. How could you not be?
Right.
I guess we were excited. We knew there was a change coming, and we didn't know if it was going to be our platoon or our sister platoon.
Okay.
But one was going to be turned into an Afghanistan team. And so our platoon got turned into an Afghanistan platoon. And so they ramped, I'm not saying they ramped up the training, but they changed the training once they found out that we were going to go to Afghanistan.
Made it a little more applicable to what you were going to go see. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is, we often do say that we ramp up the training based on this or that, right? And I think it is kind of the wrong terminology, because in general, we try and prepare for what we're going to go do, while still taking everything, all the potential negative consequences, keeping those in mind. We just, most of us EOD techs are like, we're smart, but not like word smart.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, look how I'm talking right now. Yeah. So.
But no, that's
words, they're hard.
Yeah, exactly. I actually was just talking to somebody the other day, and I know I've said it several times, and other people on here have said like words are hard. Yeah. And they're like, that's my favorite part is when you guys all say words are hard.
It is. Like, what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So just do it.
Exactly.
So.
No, I do think it's good though, because I know even on, carrier versus an Iraq or Afghanistan, right? You're still preparing for if you fly off of the carrier and go do something, but you also want to focus on what you're actually being there to do, which is obviously more fun than Iraq or Afghanistan.
No, but I understand what you're saying. So like when we did the Pathfinder, when we did that flyaway with them, it was one of our last missions, and they're like, hey, we're just gonna fly out here real quick, the classic real quick, which ends up being 14 hours later, and we're just gonna go out here, we just want to blow some stuff, and we're gonna come back. And we're like, all right, obviously there's more to that, but we're not gonna go into all that. And so we went out there, and by that part of deployment, my team leaders felt that I could go off and set up everything on my own and do everything on, there wasn't that like, let me hold your hand, let me walk you through this, And so I went off and, I set my charges, and I'm coming back, and, I'm like, all right, pulled smoke. And I'm like walking back, and the helo's getting ready to land. I'm like walking the helo, and one arm, my, Army dude's with me, and I'm like running. I'm like, let's go, dude, and he was younger than me. He's like, I'm like, come on, man. Like, let's go. Like, we got to get out of here, And on the way home, we were flying back, and the pilot saw this like shiny light in the middle of the sand nowhere.
Yeah.
And it was a metal door on the ground. And so they're like, oh, we're going to go down and investigate this.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, firefight, JDAMs are being dropped, like we go on the ground, like, and it was hilarious because like they opened up the door and they threw in, not a frag.
Flashbangs?
Thank you. God, I can't speak words, right?
That's why we have a team.
They threw in a flashbang, and next thing you know, like, dude just comes out like, and we all, get to the,
Yeah.
And so there's a fight. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And there's nothing around.
Yeah.
I mean, for miles, there's nothing around. I'm like, what the hell? You're just out in the middle of nowhere. Just boom, here we are. And it was hilarious because, we're doing our bounding back. Mm-hmm. And because there's that one little sand dune that you could go to in the middle of Iraq. And it was hilarious because it was the first time ever that I had experienced a JDAM being dropped. And so I'm sitting there, and my team leader, he has the camera, and I laugh now because at this moment, I didn't know. I could hear this like, and you hear me saying like, what's that noise? And it, and afterwards I was like, oh,
Now I know.
Yeah. And so, a couple of JDAMs later, you're like, oh shit, it's pretty intense, and then there's we flew back to Warhorse, and we were waiting on our bird to go back to Spiker. And, it was hilarious. 'Cause like, wow, like that was like something you see on TV where it's that classic, like you thought you would be gone for like 2 hours, and
yeah,
you're like, damn, I'm hungry because I didn't pack enough food,
right?
I need some water because I ran out of water so many hours ago. So those are those things that you don't expect, and then they happen, and it ends up being great.
Yeah,
ends up being a great experience.
That's pretty cool. I'm pretty sure that scenario translated into a drill that I ran through up at China Lake.
Oh.
I won't ask the questions on here, but but it sounds very similar to this call that we got during FTX. And I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, why are we in the middle of nowhere? And why are we trying to go underground in the middle of no? Oh, okay. Yeah. I start seeing what's going on.
It's funny that you say it, because just recently, within the past 3 years, being at a higher rank, and then you're the guy that's doing the drills and watching the drills or grading the drills, and you hear the younger guys like, well, that would never happen, and in your mind you're like,
right,
this is how you're like, actually did.
Yeah,
This is stupid, this would never happen. You're like, I'd love to say it, but it's not. That's actually it does.
Yeah. Let me take you into the skiff, and I'll show you when it actually did happen.
Right.
Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually some drills when I was at T2 that I set up in as FTX for the nuke drills.
Okay.
That I don't know. I got bored for a couple of days and went on the computer and started searching around. And was like, there's no way.
Right.
And set them up, and you're just like that. This isn't a thing. You're
right.
like, oh, but it is.
Oh, but it is. It actually did happen.
Yeah.
So yes. So
That's
it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
But it was a good time. And then coming back and then training up, it's hard not to, like I said earlier, it's hard not to compare your first platoon to your next platoon, right? Mm-hmm. And so different folks, different strokes, right? So you had different personalities. On that platoon, I ended up being the LPO. And so a different role, different responsibility. And then I had another first class who, he was junior to me. And so they made me the LPO. But I was, just getting ready to have my senior badge. But he had a senior badge. And so what was awesome was, what was unique and awesome I guess is the best way to describe it. Is so when I was on my first platoon, my one team leader was a first class, my other team leader was a second class, and coming into EOD later as going through school and coming to my first team as a first class, there was never that awkward, well, I'm a second class and you're a first class and it was hey, you've done this, you've deployed multiple deployments, you're my team leader. And so there was that respect, I guess is how to say it, that like, hey, I get it, and so when the doors close, it just stuff like that didn't matter.
Right.
When you go out and you call, you go out and you do your drill, stuff like that, just, that didn't matter. It didn't matter what your rank was or what, like these two they were my leaders. They were my guys. They were my members who were like, hey, this is what you want to do. And this is why. Yeah. And so I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the aspect of how, even though those two were completely different, there was the explaining where I've watched some team members or some teams and, function, and there's no explanation going on. There's no, hey, this is why we're doing it. There's just stuff on the team there and you do this, and so I enjoyed that. And then when you come back and then you get put on as LPO, and then the other first class came and he was senior, it was like, oh, okay. And it was very confusing at first for the platoon because they were like, well, who do I listen to her or do I listen to? And so we had to establish like, hey, our day-to-day tasks, like Navy stuff, like 3M and all the other wonderful fun stuff, I was like, you listen to me. But when it comes to like certain other things, hey, you listen to him. And so it was a little confusing at first, but then we got into it. And a lot of the guys that I had deployed with to Iraq were also on the platoon to Afghanistan. And so we all had experience. We only had two new guys on our Afghan team. So we all had work. We all know we had work, but we knew the other first class, he had more work than us combined. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes I don't realize, and I don't know, again, we go back to knowing definitions of words, and I'm not great at that. But there's a difference between being like the manager of a team, right, where all the day-to-day tasks, you know who's good at what, and okay, you're doing 3M and you're getting dive rigs ready and you're doing this and that, whatever, and then experience level matters for supervisory positions, right, where, even today, right, as a senior chief, if I have a second or a first class that's my dive soup, they're in charge of that dive evolution. And if they give me a task, I'm gonna yell at them. Just kidding. I'm not. I'm gonna go do that task, right? Because they're the dive soup. If they're a UI, then I'll yell at them. But no, it is kind of weird though, and it is. And I feel like that would be. It could get even weirder in that LPO first class position. But being able to have that, I feel like having these small teams is good, and generally we're able to have that conversation. Yes. Where we're like, okay, how are we, like, this is the cards that were dealt. These are the facts. How are we going to play these cards? Right. Like, so that we all win, because we don't need to get in a contest every day.
I mean, there's enough contests already.
Exactly. That's true. I lose most of them. No, that's good. Deploying to Afghanistan, how different was that than Iraq?
That was completely different.
That's what I've heard.
Funny story. We left on Cinco de Mayo. And the reason why it's a funny story is because we were supposed to leave like, I think a week earlier. And of course the plane, breaks down here, breaks down there, it doesn't show up, or they don't have this part. And it's Cinco de Mayo. It's the morning of Cinco de Mayo. And we're like,
time to have fun.
We're not going to leave today, And what I want to make known is my team chief to Afghanistan, by far, best team chief I ever had. He was brutally honest, but he was great. Yeah. Huge mentor of mine. He retired, and when I made chief, I asked him to come out and put my ear. Greg, very, very honest, very just to the point, and I think in a job like this, you need someone like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I really enjoyed his leadership style. And a lot of people didn't. And that's fine because everyone's, teach their own.
Right.
Afghanistan, the war was completely different. The
Yeah.
IEDs were completely different. The terrain, hiking was just, you learned to love it.
Yeah.
So that's where I was introduced to MATVs, like
Oh, yeah.
the Tonka toy looking trucks. Yeah, they were great for the terrain, but I don't think they were personally great for working out of, just because of where you could place your robot and stuff
Right.
like that. So it was interesting. We met the Norwegians that we would be working alongside with, and they were great folks. It was interesting working with a different country and seeing what tools they had, and then just talking about their procedures and our procedures, and some things that they had were better, some things we had were better, and just working alongside them was very interesting, and doing missions with them was great. It was just I can't explain, the experience that you get on these deployments, because there's nothing else like it in the world.
Right.
So I sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think it's interesting because we often, especially as new guys, right, growing up in America, used to, if you've never gone outside and kind of seen outside of America before, you would assume, wrongfully so, that all of our stuff is going to be better than everybody else's all the time.
Right.
And it turns out that's not the case.
No. It was very different. So in Iraq, we had our own compound, we had our own area. And in Afghanistan, we were with Army, and so we had my team members were all in one tent together, and then I had to go in a different tent. And we were, and I remember being like, and when we were in Iraq, there were parts where we would go down and live in one of the old palaces. And my teammates and I, we lived in a room. And it was just like, the three of us live in this room. And it just wasn't a big deal. And so it was kind of annoying getting a call, and them coming and waking me up, because like when I got there, the only rack available was the one all the way in the back. You know what I mean? And so they're like, "Hey, Tara, and like all the girls were like, she's not all the way back there. They're like, Tara, they want. And so finally, like the girls got so pissed off. The women, I should say women, really. The women got so pissed. They're like, you're moving up front by the fucking door.
Yeah.
Like, and I didn't want to be by the door, because you'd hear like the door opening and swinging shut, opening and swinging shut. And they're like, you're moving by the fucking door. We're putting you right by this window that's right by the door. So they would just like peel up the window, like, hey, Tara, we gotta call, So it would be funny because, even though I was right next to the jock, with Army, they're like, "Oh, we'll just go tell the dudes, and the dudes can tell her." And you just like,
just tell me.
Like, I'm supposed to know first. Like, can you let me know first, please? And they're like, "No, we'll just have that one of them wake you up." I'm like, "All right, whatever." So
It's funny you mention that, because I've been on teams with actually several teams with females, and one of my sister platoons had a chick on it.
The token.
And
all got weird.
Every single time, like, it's always somebody up there that's like, okay, she has to be separate. And everybody else, the team, the girl, everybody is like, no, we just want to be together. Like, for lots of different reasons. And honestly, some of them, just like you said, don't even have to do necessarily with like EOD things. It's just, I just want to be woken up at the same time as everybody else.
Right.
Like, how annoying is it, taking the job out of it? How annoying is it when your family is like getting up early to go on a trip, right? And then you wake that last kid up, and now everybody's waiting for the last person to get ready. Like, you just inadvertently made the one girl on the team that person every time. Like, God, that's so annoying.
It could get very, very annoying. I have no problem saying that. I mean, I remember when the ODA team in Iraq came looking for an EOD team to help, and my leadership pushed out our sister team, and because there was two teams, where we were at, and one team would go spend the week down in Tikrit in the palace, and the other team would be up there. And they're like, "Oh, you can have them." And then we were coming rolling back. They're like, "Who are these dudes? Who's this chick?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, they're our other EOD team." And they're like, "Oh, we want them." And they're like, "Oh, I don't know if I want female going on this ODA."
Yeah.
Response. So, and then when we did our workup for Afghanistan, they found it was initially Jeb Fuj, and then it switched to Afghanistan. I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if we want a female LPO going there." And so they had actually were talking, and my team chief was very honest with me. He was telling me how they were planning on swapping me out with another guy who had never done a deployment. He was a first class. He got injured. He was over at the training unit. And he was up for C duty, and they're like, "Yeah, they're thinking about swapping out with him." And I was like, "He doesn't have any deployments."
Yeah.
I was like, "He's no experience." I was like, "How's that?" And he was like, "You know why?" Like,
Yeah.
dumb. And I'm like, "I know. I'm just like, you don't want to say it."
Yeah,
but you
exactly.
you know what I mean? And so, and luckily, obviously, that didn't fall through. But it was quite funny being in Iraq. It just wasn't a big deal. But in Afghanistan, and not only with Army, but also with the people. So in Iraq, we'd get out of the truck and we'd be talking to the translator, and the Iraqers like, "Okay, cool, got it." In Afghanistan, I remember when we went and we did our first real call, and I got out and I was talking to the translator. The local was like, "Yeah, I'm not listening to what she's saying because that's a woman," and that's her culture.
Yeah.
And so that was a barrier to overcome right there. And so then it got to like, okay, well, if I say it to the translator, who is a male, and then the male translator says it to the local, then he was like, "Okay, I'll do it." And I'm like, "Okay," like, it's literally what I just said.
Yeah.
So that was a, like when they would come and like we'd meet up with security, and I'd get out. I remember the first call out at Afghanistan, I'd go in and get out of the truck, and I go up, and the Army dudes were like, "Oh." I'm like, "What's up?" I was like, "Were you expecting tall, dark, and handsome?" And they were like, "Well, we were." I'm like, "Yeah, sorry to disappoint. You get short and blonde, like."
Oh, that's funny.
I was like, 5'2". There it is. So it was interesting having to deal with that culture barrier.
Yeah.
And sometimes it worked okay, and it took a long time to build up that. And it's, you want to respect the culture, right? But you're also there to do a job.
Right.
And so I remember one village elder, I was like, "Hey, here's the deal. Either you listen to what and I didn't say it directly like this, but essentially it was like, if you don't listen to me, I'm turning around and we're going back, because it's just this is it. This is who you have, and God, Allah, whatever, sorry, dude, this is your option."
Yeah.
So and so the Army officer was like, "Hey, well, he spoke his piece to him, and then the guy was like, "Okay," and he waved us like, come, come help us." And so it is a over there. It was definitely more of a issue than Iraq. So.
Yeah, I've heard that with different jobs, not just ours, that it's in the Middle East, just in general, is a much, like if you live all your time in America, you don't even get it, you don't understand it, right? Like it's mid 2000s, it's the 2010s,
back there, over there it's not
exactly.
So, I mean, I even had that in Africa. When I went to Africa and I went down to Kenya and taught in Kenya, they wanted me to cover my head, and I was like, "Okay, I'm in your country," and then there's a point like, "Oh, you can't teach," and I'm like, "All right, well, if I don't teach, then we're not here." Because I'm the lead on this. So, there are certain, because we divvied up like, "Hey, you would teach this and I would teach that and you would teach that." And so, we'd have to sit down, we'd have to have a talk. And so it's the difference in culture.
Yeah. That's actually interesting. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of that. And, it's easy for leadership, shall we say, to say, well, just have someone else do it. Right.
Right.
But like there's a balance between having someone else do it because of one reason or another.
Right.
And then like actually saying, "No, I'm technically proficient. I am the leadership on this team. I am the one that's supposed to be doing this. So like, I get that you have your traditions and customs, however,
Right. And there is a fine line, because it's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, right?
Right.
And you don't want to come across as an asshole. But you want them to know, like, this is my place.
Yeah.
And I will do my job.
Absolutely.
And so it was a very fine line to walk on. And I also felt sorry for my guys, because I felt like, not sorry like pity, but just they did because of, with me, they had to struggle too, because they're like, oh man, like this wouldn't happen if we were with so and so.
Yeah.
Because nobody would think anything of it. And so I felt bad. I was like, oh damn, now I'm affecting A, B, and C. You know, there's like ripple effects to it. So but you know, the guys I worked with, you know, they saw it and they were like, all right. And so we would sit down like, all right, what can we do to make this better? And sometimes we came up with solutions and sometimes we didn't.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, like I said before, it really comes down to being able to actually just sit down and have that conversation try and figure something out if you can. If you can't, just being open enough to actually have, whether it's the team or leadership or another country, like actually sit down and have that conversation to figure out what you can do. You know, interesting. Yeah, it's funny because, like I said, I've you know, been on several teams with you know, with officer enlisted EOD techs, females, you know, and I've seen a lot of what you're talking about, but and I've had a lot of like conversations kind of like this, but not there's a few different perspectives that I hadn't quite realized. It's kind of interesting. And yeah.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
The thing is that, I mean, let's get the elephant out of the room here. So you, as a woman coming into a special community, right? You're coming into a male dominant field.
Yeah.
And so if you think you're going to come in and reinvent the wheel, you're naive. You're silly to think that way. If you think you're just going to be accepted among everyone, you're silly to think that way. You know, as the new guy or gal, however you want to put it, you know, you have to earn your right like every other new guy does.
Right.
Whether you know, the community wants to hear it or not, it is different.
Yeah.
And to think it's not is silly.
Right.
You know, I'll call you a bull-faced liar. You know, it is different. There are differences. And it's not every day there's a difference.
Right.
But there are certain challenges that you do face being a woman in the community. And so, you know, you have awesome EOD techs that are dudes, and you have awesome EOD techs that are chicks. You have shitty EOD techs that are dudes, and you have shitty ones that are chicks. And it is what it is. When I was in EOD school, I had a female senior chief, and it was funny. She was we were out at a bar one night, shocking. We were doing our underwater thing, and what was it? What's that base down there? Mayport? You go?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And she said to me, it was funny, it was in the bathroom of all places. super awkward, right? And she just said to me, she's like, hey, here's the deal. She goes, if you want to be successful in this community, she said, just do your job.
Yeah.
She said, too many people come in here trying, and she said people, she didn't say women, she said, too many people come in here trying to reinvent the wheel. She just go in there and just do your job. And she's like, and have fun with it. You know, and then once you start making your way up, you know, then that's when your personality starts to flourish. She's like, you got to earn your keep just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's something that I kept with me through, you know, Iraq, through Afghanistan, you know, earning that, like, okay.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, no matter who you are, that the focus should be, as the person coming in, to understand that you don't know more than you know.
Right.
And that you want to learn. And then as the person who has the experience and looking in, no matter, you know, male, female, or whatever else there is these days.
That's right. That's right. Equal.
You know, yeah. It's having, looking in and saying, hey, like, this is what I expect from everyone. And no matter who it is, right?
And that's one thing that
that standard.
I give credit to my first 2 teammates. They held me at that standard where some of the other people in that platoon didn't.
Yeah.
They held me to that standard and they pushed me to that standard. And then they made me go above and beyond that standard.
Nice.
So then when I came back and, it's everybody, right? It wasn't just me. It was like, they're good to go. Yeah, they're good to go.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that everybody out there thinks that you or I or whoever is good to go. I mean,
Right.
Of course there's, but I, of course, back then when it's like 2:00 in the morning, you're still driving the damn pack bot with its stupid little puck,
I actually love those pucks. I'm the weirdo.
But, you didn't appreciate it back then, but now you do. And the learning you gain, the experience that you gain is just,
Yep.
So.
It's something that I found that has helped me just a lot, especially when I was younger, and I didn't do it all the time. And that's why I found out it helped me a lot, because when I didn't do it, it was always significantly harder and I got yelled at a lot more, was just being straight up honest about the things I'm good at and the things I'm bad at.
Yes.
And if I'm bad at something, just be like, hey, can you help me with this?
Right.
Whether that's, back in the day, I used to be a runner and not as strong as I was, and now I'm not a runner, so that's depressing. But like if I needed help lifting something, I just straight up asked, hey, help me throw this in the truck, right?
Yes.
And if I, sucked at driving the robot, which there was 3 days when I first showed up that I wasn't that great, but just kidding. It was a lot more than 3 days. Hey, I'm getting yelled at because I suck at this.
Right. It's not
Can
because,
you help me?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing in our community that, we all have that alpha mentality, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I should ask for help. But you should always ask for help. I mean, on my first team, my teammates were like, you're 5'2", you're a $120 soaking wet. Like, we're putting you on a weightlifting program. I was like, okay, because that was before the way dive school is now with like the HP program and all that stuff, And so, they put me on a program, and so squatting and benching was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Don't ask me to do it now.
Exactly.
It was phenomenal. I mean, one of them was a big CrossFitter and the other was more of a traditional weightlifter. And so I got the best of both worlds, and I looked great.
Yeah.
Pre-kids. We all look great pre-kids. So.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, so that was a big hurdle in Afghanistan. And like I said earlier, just the type of IEDs, and then the terrain was also very interesting. Probably one of the most memorable calls that I had in Afghanistan, we arrived on scene and it was the classic, like, this is the only bridge that goes into the city.
Yeah.
We have to save this city. It's these 2 jugs under this bridge that's going into this small little town, and it was a command wire, and the Afghani army had torn apart was kind enough to take apart the command wire for us. And I remember sitting there and they were like, hey, there's these, we know there's jugs underneath there. And we're like, all right. And it was tiny. I mean, this, it was just tiny. And my 2 team members were pretty big dudes. And I was like, okay, well, and time to go earn the pay, And so I got there and I'm talking, and I stripped down, and I had my little mini metal detector with me because they had been known to, lay stuff down, and anti-personnel landmines. And so I go and I crawl under this, this bridge, and I'm crawling into this tunnel, and it was hilarious because I have like the flashlight and I'm like scanning, and I come up to it, and it's so funny, when you watch the movies, you're all like cool guy, like, psh, well, like I'm like profusely sweating as I'm like trying to hook up my, my carabiner to the jugs, and I'm like crawling back out, and all of a sudden, this insect that I have never seen in my life just like crawls over my hand and up my sleeve, and I have no problem saying that I freaked the fuck out.
Yeah.
Because I will say this, like, if you're gonna die underneath the bridge with 2 40-pound jugs, you're gone. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely.
But what you don't know is that damn thing bites you and you don't know what it is, and then you contract some like God forbidden like weird something. And so I'm all like like trying to wiggle backwards out, and I'm like, you know, like you see, like you're just like, oh god, oh god, oh god, and it was like this long thing, and it had like 1,000 legs, and it just had these 2 huge pinchers on it, and I was like, oh. And my guys were, of course, they're watching on the big video. You know, they had the the eagle eye or whatever, on their truck, and they're ready, like, what the hell are you doing? You know, I could hear them on the kids, like, what the hell are you doing? And I was just like, oh, what the hell? You know, and then you come back to the truck, and they're like, what is wrong with you? I was like, dude, this thing climbed on me, and they're like, seriously? I'm like, you gotta understand, because it was just one of those, like, you saw, like, Indiana Jones, where it, like, crawls up, and you're like, oh.
Oh, not cool.
Yeah. So I'll always remember that, because they just kept making fun of me the entire time, and I'm like, hey, if it happened to you, you would do the same thing,
right?
You know. So that was hilarious. The rest of the call went great. You know, we pulled him out, and then we, you know, but yeah, that was that was a good one. And let's see here. Probably the funniest thing that ever happened. Anyone who knows me knows that I have no problem speaking my opinion. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
as you know.
I can confirm.
Yes. And so we got a call, and we responded, and here this Army op, and we dropped the robot, and we're looking for this item, and we're like, where the hell is this damn item? And so finally, this Army officer, he was like, oh, hey, yeah, so we picked it up, and we put it in our truck. And I was like, what? And so I walked down, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to need you to kick it out of the truck. And he's like, well, do you want to come down and grab it? And I was like, no, I don't. I was like, just, you know, and he straight up just RCID. He figured, since he was in a truck with ECM, that if he put the item in his truck, he would be okay. And then he also had his 4 dudes in there with him. And so I was like, what, are you fucking stupid? And forgetting that it's Army. Yeah. Right? So we take care of the issue, and we were driving back, and we get back on base, and the sergeant major is sitting there waiting for me, and he's like, hey, young lady. He always called me young lady. He's like, hey, young lady, come here. And I was like, oh, hey, Sergeant Major, how's it going, you know? And he was like, I got to work. I need to talk to you right now. And I was the E6. Yeah. And he was like, did you disrespect one of my junior officers? And I said, no, not that I know of. And he was like, well, I'm being told that you called him stupid. And I was like, I didn't call him stupid. And he was like, are you calling my JO a liar? I was like, no, sir. I was like, no, Sergeant Major, I'm not calling him a liar. And he's like, well, if you didn't call him stupid, if you're telling me you didn't call him stupid, and he's telling me you did, he's like, what was said then? And I said, well, Sergeant Major, I called him fucking stupid. And he just looked at me, and he was like your classic, like, something that you would expect of an Army, like, just like leathered skin, buttery teeth from smoking so much, that really raspy voice, you know. And he just starts laughing. He goes, you know what, young lady, you're going to be all right. And I was like, am I in trouble? And he goes, just stop calling my JOs fucking stupid. And I was like, yes, Sergeant Major. And I walked out. I was like, whew, dodged a bullet there, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So, that's amazing.
Yeah, you know, that's that smart ass, you know, we're witty like that.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? So
and it's true. Like,
well, yeah, I really did want to talk to him about the fact that he literally picked up the ID and put it in his vehicle. Yeah. With 4 other dudes in there. I'm like, I don't care if you do it by yourself and you want to be stupid. Right. Exposing everybody else to that.
That's crazy. Oh, that's hilarious, though.
That was, you know, that was pretty good. So that was one of the funnier moments.
Yeah. Did you tell the rest of the team when you got back?
Yeah.
That's awesome. What'd they say?
Oh, they were laughing.
They were cracking up? Yeah.
We were more in shock that he went and he complained about that. Yeah. So, because we had something similar happen to us in Iraq where an an Army officer was upset because we weren't wearing the official combat boots that you were supposed to be wearing, that we were all wearing like Solomons and, Merrills or something.
Yeah.
They reported us, and it's like, these are the things that we're going to argue about.
Right.
So it was shocking, but it was our joke of the moment. So, yeah.
That's funny. Those things that make it worthwhile.
But I get that. It was funny because when I told my parents that, my dad just smiled at me because he was like, yeah, you would say something like that. And I'm like, well, I learned from you, Dad,
Right.
Like,
That's funny.
Yeah.
So your next two teams went to Africa.
Yeah. So I came back and I transferred to the East Coast.
Okay.
So I had gotten married, and he was on the East Coast and I was on West Coast, obviously. And we were up for orders. And because I was up for orders first, the detailer was like, all right, we're going to send you to the East Coast.
Okay.
And so that's how I got to Moving too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So looking at, East Coast versus West Coast, like by that time.
This is
pretty
2011.
Okay. So not everything had home ported quite yet, but everything was pretty close to home porting, right? Like, so you knew it was going to be one or the other. Did you, taking the husband out of it, did you want to stay in San Diego? Did you like San Diego?
I did like San Diego. I really wanted to go to Europe or Guam.
Okay.
And with being married, we were like, hey, we really like to get overseas.
Yeah.
And we had two detailers back to back tell us the stars, moon, and sun would have to line to get both of you.
Really?
Yes. And so we were like, well, that sucks. And we were told then, like, you would have to stay like one or the other.
Gotcha.
So, and one of the reasons why we stayed East Coast was the gun laws.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so yeah, there's that.
That's actually funny. When I came back from Guam, so I was originally going to come back from Guam a lot earlier than I did. Mm-hmm. And then if I did that, I would have gone to San Diego. But when I held off, my now wife, I asked her, I was like, hey, where do you want to go? And she's like, I don't want to be in California anymore. And I was like, all right, cool. And so then I started making plans to buy a few cool guns, because I was like, well, if I'm not going to be in California,
right.
I'm going to have cool guns.
Right.
Like,
yeah, that was I don't want to say we based our life on an inanimate object, but we based our life on an inanimate object. So
I feel like it's an okay one to base it on.
Right. And taxes.
Yeah.
And taxes.
Yeah, seriously. Oh my goodness. Yeah. California is beautiful, but it is expensive and crazy.
California is a beautiful state. Yeah. I mean, something about San Diego is that, you have mountains, desert, ocean, Vegas. You know, I mean, it's a great package.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Coming out here, and then, we already kind of touched on it a little bit. You came out here and doing the training unit, seeing the differences and the type of training, right? Once you came out here and you were going through training, how did you compare the two at the time? I did.
Yes, of course I did. So, because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
Right. So it was extremely different with the fact that, doing surface, not using live demo or not going up to China Lake, the FEP, like staying there and just sleeping in the room, and dudes leave and go get pizzas. And I was like, wait, what? We're not roughing it, like with no electricity or no running water, you're not living off of a generator and a microwave that you hope doesn't like cut off the whole tent, Right. So it was different. I remember the first time going diving, it was
terrible.
It was February.
Yeah.
It was snowing.
Oh.
And they're like, oh, we're going for dive day. And I'm like, yeah, it's snowing. I mean, I'm not a wimp here. Okay. You can call a spade here, but like, it's fucking snowing.
Yeah.
What are we doing here, dude? So, and when you're $115, okay, it's cold.
It hits different.
Right? It's different. All right. So, damn right, I was putting on that 7 mil, I don't have those layers of warmth like some people do.
Right.
And then I remember the first time we went out to go dive 16, and we get in the boat and they're like, oh, we're going to Ches Light. And I had no idea where Ches Light was. And I was like, all right. And we're driving. I'm like 45 minutes. I'm like, where the hell are we going? Like, oh, we're going out to Chesley. I'm like, why? Why are we driving this far to go to Chesley? And like, oh, we got to hit 60 feet. I'm like, we're driving an hour and a half just to hit 60 feet. Because, I'm not, it just wasn't something I was thinking. I was so used to just popping in the San Diego Bay and boom, you're right there, doing undets. And there's like the shores of Coronado.
Exactly.
I don't know if it's different anymore, but everything was just boom, boom, boom right there besides China Lake. And so that was very interesting. Even the Mobian itself, like going from Mobian 1, which was this huge, just open bay building where you could put all of your ISUs and your boats in your dead space, your platoon space. And I remember rolling up to Mobian 2 and I walked into the platoon space and it looked like the cage where, you'd hang your wetsuits. And I'm like, what? Where's the rest of the dead space? And they're like, this is it. And I remember my team chief, he just started busting out. He's like, oh, you're not on the West Coast anymore, girlfriend. Like, this is it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this, like you could hear the conversation of the team right next to you because you're just in cages, and you're like, oh, this is weird.
Yeah.
So that was hilarious to me. It was almost like I would like to say like culture shock.
Yeah.
And the training was great, because we had guys who'd, been in country. When I got to 2, I was the only person that had been to Afghanistan. And so I gave some training on some of the metal detectors that had come out. And I just was like, hey, this is what worked for us. Not saying it's going to work for you. This is where we were at because I was up north and I also went down south in Afghanistan for a bit. And I was like, hey, this is what worked up here. This is what worked down here better, And so sharing those stories was hopefully helpful.
Yeah.
With the metal detector. And then being in our tiny closet of a dead space. And then, I learned all about the sand dunes.
Oh, yeah.
And the sand dunes and, they tore it down now, but the house that used to be in the compound and, going to Tutu and there's trees. And you're just like, okay, there's trees everywhere, and not being able to actually use a bootmaker.
Right.
Because, so, but I will say, I think that this is at the time, so I don't want to upset like any training unit, but at the time, where underwater and surface was, to me, ahead over at 2-1, I felt that like when I went through nukes at 2-2, I was like, holy shit, this is completely different, with the program that they had that, the only name I'll drop here because he's civilian is Randy, that Randy was building. It was like, it wasn't, I remember being out at my first 2 workups and you're like, okay, you're reading this, when you're doing your right angle bisection, you're like, oh, you gotta go. And where you walked in, you're like, holy shit, my tool's actually working. Like, what is this? This is so weird, So, so that was, to me, that was mind blowing.
Yeah.
And then chem was also, I was like, it's a little more intense. They had like lab setups and stuff like that where, unfortunately, like where in San Diego, at that time, they only had like a room and they had like a couple small, tiny, like, okay, this is what this would look like. Whereas at 2-1, they had all their areas that they had all different stuff set up. And I was like, whoa, this is neat. So.
Yeah, it is interesting. So my first 3 teams, I went through 2-1.
Okay.
And then I came out to actually work at 2-2. And it was very interesting how different it was. Yes. Yeah. And I think you hit it though, like the people with the experience is what made the training no matter where you were.
Yes.
Though. So like, yeah, you may have the best, the ability to blow up everything, right? And to use, a pound on a training roadside or whatever to see what it does and this and that. But if you don't have the people with the experience to actually like show you how to actually use that and where to actually place it to do what you want, it kind of means nothing, Yeah. It doesn't mean nothing, but it takes you a lot longer. Yes. Yeah. And coming out here, I was shocked as well and a little bit skeptical, but then I, start listening to all the guys training and you see how invested people are.
Yes.
And that made all the difference.
No, it did. Everything. It was also shocking. It was also shocking where it was like, 5:30, 6:30 at night in Mobian, and dudes still hanging around. It's like, do you hate your
Yeah.
family, or are you gonna go home? Like,
Right.
What's up?
I remember even at the training unit when I first got here, I was actually, so it was actually a little bit weird because I would see the friends that I know that were on mobile units here, exactly that. At the training unit, though, because most of the people that were at the training unit at T2 were East Coast mobile units.
Okay.
So when they were at the training unit, they were like, okay, if we don't have somebody in the division, go home, you know? But I just came back from Guam, and it was during a weird phase where, we'll just say, a lot of people were getting in trouble, and so we paid the price for that. So it was like, you did not leave the command before 4:30 unless you were ready to tell the XO or the skipper why. Because there were people that, like, straight up XO or skipper were like, hey, why are you leaving? Like, oh, I've got an appointment.
I enjoyed Tutu. It was interesting. I was LPO again, and I had a good team. I had a hilarious OIC. Oh my God, it was, man. So all your teams are like dysfunctional families, right?
Yeah.
And this team was like the creme de la creme of like a dysfunctional family. I mean, we had a bunch of characters, and it was it was a good time. It was team chief was hilarious. Sometimes I felt like I had to be the mom.
Yeah.
You know, and then to both of them, because where my OIC was so uptight and then my team chief was so relaxed, it was just like it was hilarious. It was hilarious. So we had to go out there to St. Louis to do this course.
Yeah.
And that was a great team building event.
Yeah.
So that was quite hilarious. Going around St. Louis and you know, with your team chief who loves to have fun, and then your OIC who's like so nervous about everything. That was quite hysterical. And then we deployed early January. We deployed like right after New Year's, and that was 2012. And we got to Africa, and it was different. It was weird, because being used to wearing your kit and, you know, having a rifle, and, you know, whether you were in a vehicle or you're flying away, you know, in a 60 or whatever, it was weird. We get there and we land on the Djibouti airport, and they pick us up in like those little jingle buses, you know?
Yeah.
And we drive on to base, and you're like, oh, okay. And I remember when we were doing our turnover, the team chief was like, hey, hop on in. I'm gonna take you around the city of Djibouti. And we're like, all right. And so I go to the weapons case, and he's like, oh, you don't need that. And I was like, what? I said, you don't need that here. And I was like, all right, well, am I taking my pistol? He's like, you don't take anything here. I was like,
This feels foreign.
yeah. And so we hopped in a Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
And it was my team chief up front, myself, my OIC in the back, and then he had one of his E5s. And of course I was small, so I sat in the middle, right? I'm like, you know, and we're just passing like jugs after blue jugs after yellow jugs. I'm just like,
Something's gonna happen.
and I'm like sweating, and I'm just like, oh, this is so good. I'm just like looking around. And I remember he was a new guy, and he was like, what's up? Why are you so tense? And I was like, dude, like, this is weird.
Yeah.
You know? And it's not because I'm like, oh, I'm so combat veteran. You know, it was something completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the team chief being nice, he was just like, hey, Tara, he's like, just out of curiosity, like, what you know, like, where are you guys deployed? And it was my OIC, you know, obviously it was my OIC's first deployment, and then my team chief like named off his like long list of deployments, and I named off mine. And the kid beside me is like, oh, you actually got to do that? And I was like, yeah, dude, I did. And I was like, he's like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, yeah, I guess so, you know. And but it was weird. It was weird being in a place where you just drove around in a normal car.
Yeah.
You could go out, you know. if anyone's been to Djibouti, they all know about the Kempinski Hotel. I don't know what it's like now, but, guys would go there for dinner, and swim in the pool and drink, and so it was just, you weren't supposed to drink, but you did. It was a weird place because, we were doing ATFP diving, and you're diving in, well, if you went out to the further pier, it was nice, not in the main pier, because the main pier, like, there's like
all the crap water.
The crap water and all the dead animals that are like floating right beside you, and you're just like, ugh. Yeah. Like, just want to put like a chem suit on and just, like, ugh. So, but it was different, the diving was phenomenal. It was beautiful. It was something completely different, and it took a while to relax to get into that mode, simply because the fact that I wasn't used to it, and it was different. It was weird. You had your own room. You were in like I called them chews. It was literally like a trailer. It looked like a trailer, like something, like an 18-wheeler totes behind. There was like a bed in it, and you had like a little desk for a computer, and then you shared a shower with someone on the other side. And, we had our EOD compound that only us were in. And, we're doing turnover with this other team. This team's just like walking around with like cut off tank tops and like, walking around like you own the base, it was funny. And, it was just something that I'd never experienced before.
Yeah.
And so at the time my husband was in Afghanistan, and it was hilarious because I remember we Skyped, and he was like, and it was like January, right? February. And he had deployed like a couple weeks after I did. And it was hilarious because he calls me, and his first deployment was pretty nice. He had some nice luxuries on his first deployment. And this one he didn't. He was like some bumfuck nowhere, like, and he's like, I haven't taken a shower in like 4 days, babe. What'd you do today? And I was like, I swam with whale sharks.
Just rubbing it in.
And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, I swam with whale sharks today.
That's awesome.
And he was like, are you effing kidding me? And I was like, oh. I was like, I'll send you the photos. Like, it was pretty cool. Like, it was the first time I ever had like a GoPro, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, check this. I was like, I wish I could send this to you, and
so that's legit.
It was hilarious. Like, and he was like, oh, well, yeah, and you could see like his like shift change, like almost like I know he wanted to be like, must be fucking nice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I was like, whatever, dude. Like, so, because that was hilarious. It was just, and man, I was like in the best shape of my life there because it wasn't busy. It wasn't.
Yeah.
And so you either ate and you got fat or you worked out.
Right.
So I just started working out. I started running. I hate running, but I started running. Like I was great at running there, because there's just like, God, there's like nothing to do.
Yeah.
Our big call was there was a downed U-28.
Okay.
And that went down, and it was like panic with, I remember the phone ringing in the office, and I picked up, and it was the XO of the base, and there was a lot of panic in his voice, and I was like, sorry, I can't understand. You need to calm down. And he was like, hey, we had a plane, it went down. We need to get out there, we need to see for survivors. And I was like, okay. And so we'd work with the PJs, and we were talking to the PJs, and so they were spinning up a bird. And I was the LPO at the time, it was first class, and they were like, hey, we want, and the thing about Djibouti was most of them were reservists, right? And so he was like, we want your team chief out there. We want your team chief out there. And I was like, okay. And so they wanted 7. They wanted a chief out there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, well, I gotta go find him because, it was his night off. We had days, like today was your day. If there was a response, it was your day. Tomorrow, right. We rotated team leaders because him and I were the 2 team leaders of the team. And so I was like running down in kit, and I found him like, hey, I just want to let you know this happened. We're going to go, blah, blah, blah. And I took two of my new guys, and the 2 guys that went with me had never really, this was their first deployment. And so this was their first, like, oh shit, like, here we go, we're going to do this. Yeah. And it was terrible. It was a terrible outcome. Obviously there was no survivors. Mm-hmm. And we spent hours and hours there. And I remember with the new guys, the one guy, when we came across the first remains, like he got pretty sick, and I was like, hey dude, it's normal, like it's,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I was like, don't, and we spent a very long time there, of course, because we wanted to bring as much home as back to the base as we could.
Right.
And that sucked, man. That was a real damper because you know, I never followed up on the report or anything like that, but we don't know what happened. It's I don't know what happened, but it was frustrating,
Yeah.
and to come back, and their unit was like waiting for us at the gate, and asking like what it looked like, what you find, what you see, and it's like, oh, you didn't want to, because you knew it was their guys.
Yeah.
So that's part of EOD that is hard. That's part of the job that is hard, is when it affects someone, when you see it on someone else's face, someone that it was their team member or their friend or something, and then you want to be respectful.
Yeah.
And it's not that you don't want to tell them, but you don't want to tell them because it's a fine line.
Yep.
Right. So it was hard to just say, I'm sorry, but there just wasn't a chance.
Right.
And so that was very frustrating, because a lot of emotions go through that. Right. And so that was hard. And then, doing the report, and then, because this was like one of the first instances that happened like this ever. I mean, we went out the next day with NCIS, and, trying to keep the Djiboutians from scrapping what was left,
Right.
and trying to keep it like essentially like an NCIS, like a crime scene where things were like labeled and marked off and where things were found. It was a good, I think we spent a good three days there, just,
Really?
trying to get as much information as possible. And it was hard at night because, I mean, it was just such a huge area. And like I said, I mean, people would just come out of nowhere, just trying to scrap stuff, because it's not, the country is just a very poor country.
Yeah.
So that was pretty rough. And then I left that deployment early. I left that deployment about 2.5 months in. My team chief, my OIC, had it was an awkward moment where, with my husband being deployed, him and I would arrange like when we would get on high side and talk to each other. And so I was waiting for him, and so I knew if he wasn't there, like, okay, he must be on a call. And unfortunately, he got injured, and I got notified, and that was one of those moments where my team chief, after he had told me, and the initial shock and everything happened, he was like, what do you want? And I was like, I need to leave. I need to go. And nobody had a problem with it. I mean, it'd be kind of weird if you did.
Yeah, right.
Right. And so it took me about, I would say it took me about 48 to 36 hours to get out of there, because all the official channels that have like people being notified,
Right.
and then with me being notified, and then reaching back to the commands, like with him being on a mobile unit, and then me being on a mobile unit, and then those two mobile units talking, and then trying to get on a plane over at the Djiboutian airport. They update their system at the time. This is 2012. They only updated their system once every 24 hours.
Okay.
And so my name wasn't on the manifest for one of the flights out. So I had to wait for, another day before I could get flown out.
Yeah.
And I met my husband in Landstuhl.
Okay.
So, yeah. And so that started a new journey.
Yeah.
I guess you could say. So, and it was, what was lovely, what's great about this community, right, is there was a team from, I believe, 8 that was in Germany, and the 2 dudes picked me up, and they took me to Landstuhl, and I guess those guys had been going over there and visiting him and seeing him.
That's cool.
And it was hilarious too, because I get in the car, and they're there with like a handle of Jack and some porn mags, and I was like, well, who are the magazines for? And they were like, oh shit, yeah, sorry. Like, you're his wife. And I'm like, yep. So it's like, I mean, like,
there's not no RM matrix for that.
so that was hilarious. That and it broke the ice for them too, because you know, I look back on it, and it had to be awkward for them too, because they're like, oh my God, is she gonna be hysterical? Is she gonna be pissed? Like, you know, and you're a little bit of everything. It's a very to say it's not an emotional moment is to lie, right?
Right.
So it was just hilarious. I get in the back of their Beamer, because that's what they had, and I was like,
roughing it.
Yeah, right. And I'm like, oh, all right, well, what are this for? Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was hilarious. So, and then I'm not going to go much into this, but I will say, so being the smartass that I am, and the witty person, I remember I didn't want to cry when I saw him first.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be like, all right, I can do this. And you're like talking yourself up, you know, because it's your significant other.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so they were telling me, they're like, hey, you know, this is what he looks like. His, you know, blah, 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 blah. He's got a cast on his wrist because he sprained his wrist, blah, blah, blah. And so I walk into the room, and, you know, and he was behind a curtain because he was with a nurse. And I pull back the curtain, and he sees me and I see him, and the nurse had her back to me, and such an asshole. I said, I didn't know we were giving Purple Hearts out for a sprained wrist.
Oh my gosh.
I'm such an asshole. But I know that sounds like a horrible thing to say, but it kept me from not just losing it. And he just starts laughing. And this nurse turns around, and she's like, excuse me, young lady. I don't know who you think you're talking to, but this is a war. And I was like, and he's like, ma'am, it's okay. That's my wife.
I'm sure that nurse was like, I have no idea what these two are into.
And,
oh my goodness.
And from there started our epic journey of just me throwing out sarcastic one-liners. So it's just, yeah, it was, yeah. So,
I feel like that entrance, that for me in either situation, I feel like that would be the best entrance. Because like, yeah, it brings a light like to the room. It brings some humor to the room. And then you're like, okay, instead of just, because it's those situations are tough.
Yeah. And anyone who knows who I'm married to knows what his injuries ended up being.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's his story to tell. And
right.
It was, you know, you can call it like, oh, you're really selfish thinking about yourself in that moment. But, you know, I didn't want to go in there just, you know, the way I reacted when I heard the news. I mean, you know, I wanted to be like, okay, I want to go in and say something funny. And then like, I was like, damn, was that too wrong? You know? So, there's that.
I know you don't want to get too much into things because, you know, like you said, there's the your version, you know, your portion that you lived of it, and then there's his. One thing that I want to ask is, I know just people on the team, we joke / are serious about, hey, if something happens, I want this, that, or the other. As a married couple, both doing the job, both deploying, did you guys have any conversations like that before?
Yes, we had that conversation.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, those conversations, yes, we had to have those hard conversations. Yeah. And so, you know, wills were made, conversations were had, and we knew it was a possibility.
Right.
You know, we definitely knew it was a possibility.
Yeah. Very different situation for me, but, it's interesting because, you being a wife and an EOD tech, having that understanding of what it's like to deploy and the wanting to deploy, but then also having that I'm a wife and I want him to be safe now because he just went through that, right? Obviously, this is a very different situation, but my wife now, she would get frustrated because I always wanted to deploy. I always wanted to go do a job. And then when I would be on deployment, if I couldn't talk to her when she wanted me to, sometimes it would be frustration.
Right.
But then she was a corpsman in the Navy, ended up deploying to Afghanistan.
Okay.
And after that deployment, she was like, okay, I get it. So after that, was there times where you were like, you had to be like, okay, I get it from the EOD perspective, even though the wife perspective is like, come on, dude. Like,
oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So, I mean, many, many, many moons later, he went back to Afghanistan for something. And the entire time I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, I felt like I went a little psycho there. Like, I tracked his plane. And I was like, okay, like he landed, like, because he went for something completely.
Yeah.
And I knew he wasn't going to be able to call. And then he called me when he was like, hey, we just landed a cutter. And I was like, ah! I stopped stress sweating and I was eating again. And it was just the fact that he was back there. Completely different scenario of why he was there. But it was just like, I was like, hey, I'm not comfortable with you going there.
Yeah.
It makes me uncomfortable. But it was his job.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm sure, fast forward a year and a half later, like I was, deploying and, he was at somewhere new where he wasn't deploying. And I'm sure that frustrated him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
that's an interesting thing. Cause I think, what I've seen is there's huge benefits that I have with my wife having been in the military, but then also deploying to Afghanistan, where there's times where I can tell she's thinking one thing, and then I hear teammates and their wives are saying those things.
Right.
But mine is like, you can tell she's like, I'm not happy about this, but I get it.
There's pros and cons, right? Like I remember I'd come home and I'd be like, oh yeah, we did this on a drill, and he'd be like, why'd you do that? I'm like, oh, Mr. Backstreet Driver, like telling me how to do this drill. You had that.
Yeah.
Or I do that to him, and so finally, eventually when we realized what we were doing, because, you're both alphas.
Yeah.
You're both stubborn.
Absolutely.
We were like, okay, we had this thing where it's like, okay, you had your 20 minutes to talk about work. I had my 20 minutes about work. And then we would shed the EOD off. Yeah. And then we would just be husband and wife.
That's cool.
You know what I mean? So, the joke of I'd say a story. He's like, oh, well, I did this. Or he would say a story. And I'm like, oh, what? And then we'd call each other the one up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just that natural. You start talking about it and you get excited.
Yeah.
So we, it took time. It took time to learn that, okay, we're going to have, this is where we talk about it. And then when we're home, we're home. Yeah. And, it sounds silly to say, but with his injury, it really shed some light into our relationship about okay, focus more on our relationship and then not because we were both very young. We were both very work driven. Okay, because you know how it is in the community. You do this step and then you get to this and then you have to do this qual and then you get this qual and then you have to make this step and then you get this position and then so we were both very driven, very focused, and with that it brought it more back onto us as a couple and not just as techs. Yeah. So yeah.
That's an interesting perspective to see. That's cool. You mentioned, you're married and then you had kids.
We had talked and we had decided that we wanted to start a family. Mm-hmm. And I figured, all right, well, there's no better place to start a family than when you're on CD, back from deployment, getting ready to go to shore duty. And so it was hilarious. So, working in a mobile unit and getting pregnant was a very interesting thing for the Core Minute group.
Yeah.
Because I came down and I was like, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and they're like, "Okay," and I was like, "Is that it? Is that all I have to do to you?" And then the corpsman was like, "Well, you're not pregnant until the Navy says you're pregnant." And I was like, "What does that mean?"
That is interesting.
I was like, "Okay," and they're like, "Okay, well, you have to go, do a blood test and a urine test through the Navy, through Portsmouth." And I was like, "Okay." So, and then, so obviously it was positive.
Yeah.
And so what I did not realize, when you're in a community with all men, is all of these, these rules, like if you become pregnant, you have to tell your command within so many, like within 2 weeks of, and then you have to show them the test and then you have to give them their due date. Well, then being an EOD tech, being pregnant, I had to sign the waiver of I will not dive, I will not jump, I will not fire a rifle, I will not pit live, like I will not handle demo.
Yeah.
And I say that because there's a funny story with that. So that's why I signed it away. And so then I go and I knock on my CMC's office and he's like, "Hey, Chief, come on in." And I was like, "Hey." And at the time, my name was still my main name. Still hadn't changed it. And he's like, "What's up, Geisky?" And I was like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm pregnant." And he was like, "What?" I was like, "Well, I'm pregnant." And he was like, what do we do now?" And I was like, "Well, we don't do anything." And he starts laughing and he's like, "Oh, congratulations. It's awesome." And I'm like, "Yeah, But it was weird because it's like, I didn't even tell my parents yet, so, cause it was we did the whole, wait till we got through the first trimester before we kind of, and, so it was funny. So I was in R&T and I was training up teams and I was training up a platoon and I remember going out in the boat and just like, God, it was awful. It was like, take like a hangover and times it by 12.
Yeah.
And it was funny because one of the guys on the platoon was my old team leader from Iraq. And he was like, "What's up?" I was like, "Nothing."
Oh, that's funny.
And so, doing their drills and going out and working with them. And there was a day where they were doing a demo day. And at the time, I was the only DOS in R&T. I was like, "All right, I got to go and do this." And from the mobile unit, and I get down there to the demo range. It was down at Academy. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that now, but and I had my sweatshirt on because it was wintertime.
Yeah.
And I didn't handle anything, okay, because I wasn't the DOS there. I was just there observing as R&T.
Yeah.
And I had a sweatshirt on, and the day's going. They're setting all their stuff up, and I stayed up range the entire time. Didn't touch anything. And I remember I don't know if you were at 2-2 when Mike Coulter was there. When he taught surface for a while, and then he worked down at the range down in North Carolina.
Yep.
So he was the overall guy there that day, and we were just shooting the shit. And it got hot, and I took off my sweatshirt, and he was like, "What the And I was like, "Hey," and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm at a safe distance." Like, they're like, I mean, how long the range is down.
Yeah, it's forever, yeah.
And I wasn't touching anything. I wasn't doing anything. And I'm sure people who are listening to this are like, "Seriously, I can't believe you're a terrible mother," And he was like, You're leaving. You're leaving right now." And I was like, "I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
I'm a grown woman. I'm not leaving." He's like, "Get off my range right now." And I was like, "Come on, dude." He's like, "Get off my range," And so I drive home and I open up the door and my husband's like standing there staring at me. And I was like, "Hey, babe." And he's like, "How was your day?" I was like, "It was good. How was your day?" He was like, "Got a phone call." And I was like, "Oh, shit,"
Oh, that's funny.
So there was that.
That's funny.
Yeah. And so then I transferred to 2-2. And when I transferred to 2-2, because I was going to be due in 4 months, they put me in the intel because they didn't have a chief in there. They put me in the and sick shop, and they're like, hey, just be in there because, you know, once you have your baby and come back from leave, we're going to put you, because dudes were leaving then.
Yeah.
So they're like, we don't know, we're going to put you, there's like 3 options so far. And I was like, all right. So I went in there and I learned all about the amazing like CDC system and daycare and all that amazing things that is just, wow, eye-opening. And then I was on, I had my son and I was on maternity leave, and it was hilarious because they're like, where do you want to go in tutu? And I was like, oh, I want to go to chem bio. I like love chem bio. Like I love bio. And they're like, all right, where do you not want to go? And I was like, well, I don't really want to go. I was like, I never did MCM. I was like, so I don't really think I'd be much use in MCM for you guys. And I was like, and you know, I'm not a huge nukes fan. Boom, you're going to nukes.
Yeah. I knew the ending to that story.
So, but it was hilarious because I was told I was going to chem. And then it was about a week before my maternity leave was up. So I was at home, like just studying, prepping, like looking at all the chem bio lessons for like the past, you know, my maternity leave. I'm just like reading on. I'm like, okay, I'm making my lessons plans, like my teach backs, you know, and I'm like cleaning bottles and like, you know, getting vomit all over on me. And yeah, I'm like reading all this. And I get a phone call. And it was the guy who I relieved. And I saw him calling. And it's like, as soon as I saw his name pop up on my phone, I was like, no. He was like, hey, Tara. And I was like, hey, how's it going? He's like, got a question for you. And I was like, no.
Going through a tunnel.
Yeah. So when I came back, I was going to go to nukes. And I remember there was a great debate if I should go to nukes because of just, you know, being pregnant and then being exposed to rate. And, you know, it's this huge ordeal. It's just these things you don't think about, you know? And so I ended up, I went to nukes and started that amazing journey. Nice. And I had great dudes in nukes, you know? Yeah. So Tutu was probably one of the most hilarious command divisions I worked at. Yeah. So, I mean, you know who was in there at the time. And so walking in to a professional environment, and for those who've never been in the nuke section, when you walk through the back door of T2, you walk through, and then to the right is the glass door that goes into the office. And so coming in, looking to the right and seeing your guys do couples yoga positions was quite funny. Or guys dancing to Magic Mike was even more entertaining because you just turn and you're like, what the hell? Like, and then they see you and it's awkward, right? Right. I mean, 2 dudes or 3 dudes doing yoga positions together isn't awkward, but if I saw it, it was awkward. So, yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
That was a good time. Being a divisional LCPO and especially of nukes at the time, of course, they were trying to change the SIN, right? Yeah. And so that was quite that was a very large learning curve for me. Right. Learning the whole MTS, what a SIN is, trying to get together with both coasts of what you like, what you don't like. That was very eye-opening. That was something very different. Managing all teams from all the different Mobians coming through, you know, introducing yourself and saying like, hey, welcome to nukes. And one thing that I liked to do was in the beginning, I'd like to ask like, hey, how many drills has your team done? And where would you guys say you're at? Because then, well, you would know, like when you were there around the same time I was, that they were doing that above average, or below average grading. And so I always found it hilarious when teams, I had a team they were like the best of the best. And I was like, hey, how many nuke drills have you? And they're like, oh, we haven't done any. I was like, oh, all right. I was like, and they're like, we just wanted to wait till we got to 2-2. And I was like, okay.
Interesting.
And so I come back and I tell the guys, I'm like, all right, guys, haven't done any neutrals. So then at the end, when we debriefed them, because we always did a debrief, and we told them that they performed below average, you would have thought I just, like, shot their dog. Right. You know, and it's like, man, is it really that hard to put two and two together, you know.
Did nothing before here.
Right.
And then your results showed that you did nothing before here.
Right. So that was interesting. And that was a very, that was a different style of leadership, because when you have guys on shore duty, and when there are days that there wasn't a team in house, you know, I had the leadership style of like, hey, if you got something going on at home, go and take care of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, you always have that one problem child in your platoon or your department. And so unfortunately I had like two of those. And so they take up a lot of your time. Yeah. But working with the civilian in Nukes, Randy, he was hilarious.
Yeah.
Just, you gotta love Randy.
Yeah.
So just leave it at that.
Exactly.
So he was very easy to spin up.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
I remember it was the year of the election with Hillary, and
Oh my goodness.
I put a honk for Hillary magnet on the back of his truck. And so he couldn't understand why people were honking at him for like days. He like, these people are honking at me. And then one day he always parked the same way at Tutu all the time. And then the one day, like, his spot was taken, you know, and he had to park where he could see his bumper coming out. And he came running and he was like, which one of you? You know?
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was good.
I actually did a podcast with Randy just recently.
Oh, really?
I now wish I had done yours first, because I would 100% have brought that up.
Randy's a great guy.
He is. I love him.
So he's hilarious. Smart. Oh my goodness. The things he'll start talking and I'm like, I lost you like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it now. I didn't then, but I enjoyed learning more and more, you know, about the topic. But he would start deep diving. I'm like,
Yeah.
I lost you about 20. And I'm like, He's like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So
He would say that too.
Yeah.
He'd always say, you know what I'm saying?
yeah. And he fix his hair. You know, fix his hair. Like always fixing his hair.
Gotta love some Randy.
But it was a very different perspective watching team chiefs come in and how, you know, and some guys did great and some guys did okay, and sometimes it wasn't well, and then you'd have to be that guy that was like, hey, here it is and this is why.
Right.
And you know, some people took it okay and some people didn't.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, you know, as being an instructor, it was the way we did it was, unless the team was really doing bad, then that's when my guys were like, hey, I want you to come down and watch, you know, like I'd watch a drill. I'd always watch the team drill. And so I'd watch drills. But if someone was doing really bad, they're like, hey, I want you to come watch another drill and make sure. Because we always had this backup system. Like, hey, I want to make sure it wasn't me. Like, so if we had somebody who was doing bad, so we would rotate and if they, you know, two failures, they'd be like, all right, now you come down and watch. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, so that was frustrating. You know, it's not easy sitting there and telling someone that maybe they're not performing to the level, especially someone in a leadership position. That's very hard to let them know that, like, hey, unfortunately, A, B, and C, this is where you're at, and this is where you need to be.
Yeah, so. I think some people think that you like to give people bad news and you like to break them down. But in fact, especially at the training unit, most people, like the vast majority, want to see teams and individuals succeed.
100%. I did not enjoy one bit. And what was frustrating is that sometimes there's just blatant laughs like, hey man, you didn't have it.
Yeah.
You know? And when you would hear the other guys talk about it, and then you would hear the team come and criticize, well, it's because of this, or this, or there would never be two sources on a scenario, or who, and it's like, man, just
take it.
Just take it.
Yeah.
Just own it.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that was something that was very hard for me, because one of the things I was taught right away at Mobile 1 was you own it.
Right.
You own it. So I remember this drill when I was the new guy. I didn't secure my rifle, and I was looking down, and it's funny because the guy who yelled at me actually ended up being my CMC later down the road. And I remember, like, leaning down, and my rifle came and hit something and it activated, and you heard the buzzer like, bzzz, you know, and I was just like, oh. And I remember him leaning down. And he was like, "How does it feel to know that you just killed your entire fucking team, you piece of shit?" And I was like, you know, and I never forgot that. And so when you would hear the buzzer at 2-2, and then, you know, guys would like look back at you like,
Yeah. Did you hear that?
did you hear that? And you're like, come on, dude. Like, you know, you heard that.
Yeah.
If Randy can hear it, we all heard it. So yeah, so that was, that's the hard part. That's the, you know, when you have to get personal, everyone thinks about, oh, it's just EOD work, but getting into the personal, whether the personal professional side or the personal family side or the personal side, it can be, nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a business, somebody comes in, they present you their thing that they want you to buy or change or whatever, and you can say yes or no. They either did a good pitch and you say no, or you say yes, and they did a bad pitch and you say no, and then you move on. You don't really care anything about their life. But with this job, yeah, you do take all that other stuff into consideration. It doesn't mean that because somebody has something going on in their personal life that you then say, okay, well, you did a terrible job, but I'm going to pass you.
Right.
But you're even if you're minimal time around the person, you're most of us are more invested in that why they didn't do well.
Right.
And if sometimes it is because of personal stuff at home, you're like, okay, well, is there anything we can do to help you out with that so that you can come back and then nail this so that we know and you know, because really it's more important that the person knows that they can successfully do this thing if they're asked to on deployment.
And I think with leadership, so going from making senior chief and then even making master chief, you spend what I would like to let younger people know is that you spend so much time trying to invest and help and guide younger people with issues.
Yeah.
And, you know, people are saying, oh, you're not getting this done, or oh, you're not getting this done. You know, there would be days, you know, at 2-2 or even, you know, in R&T where, you know, you weren't checking your work email until 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know, or 5:30 because dealing's not the right word, but trying to help out someone in this scenario. And then it reminded me of a house. You know, once you got something fixed, you're like, all right, now I'm going to go, like, I can chill and I can do, and then something else broke. And, you know, and you're like, all right, now I'm going to, you know, coming into work and thinking, I'm going to get this, and this done. You know, it's not like when you're a junior dude in the community where you come in, you're like, all right, I know I got to do this, and this today. I'm getting it done. And then after that, I'll see what else needs to be done. Mm-hmm. It's more of you come in and you're like, all right, what's waiting for me today?
Yeah.
And how much of it is going to take my time away from all these other things that I need to focus on?
Yep.
And that's something that I really want to let people know. It's not that people in senior leadership roles aren't trying to do the job or aren't trying to help you. It's just there's so much.
Yeah.
There really is a lot that goes on behind closed doors that unless you get to that, you know, position that you don't understand. Because I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah.
Like now, like you didn't think you'd be dealing with some of the things that you deal with as a senior chief. You're just like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Right.
And you hear and you see it all.
Yeah. And I think something that doesn't get said a lot on purpose, but oh, well, I'm going to say it, is, you know, I remember being the junior guy complaining about the senior chief or master chief that's not paying attention to the things that I got going on. But the thing that a lot of people aren't getting.
We're all guilty of that.
Right. The thing that people don't see until they want to see it, and I'll put it that way, is that just like you don't have to deal with all the stuff from your junior personnel that's going on. You don't have to.
Right.
Some of it you do, not all of it.
No, and some of it is out of your swim lane automatically, right? Whether it's like legal matters or something to that effect.
the reason why you do it though is because you actually genuinely care about
Yes.
the people, right? And then that pushes your work day further and further down the line. And then you eventually you get to start your work day.
Right.
But the thing that doesn't get talked about is just like the problems and issues, depending on what they are. Sometimes it's not always an issue is not always a problem.
Right. Right.
But all that stuff happens in your life too.
Yes.
And there are times where I have had to say like, and I don't want to, but I'm like, I literally can't deal with this other than the part that I have to deal with it.
Yes.
So, and again, that's where you reach out to other people like, hey, I just don't have the time or bandwidth, like whether it's mentally or time.
Right.
You know, and yeah. And so like, man, going back, you know, we all do it. Everybody's going to do it. I look back to the times as a junior E5 or a junior E6, right? Where I'm just complaining up a storm because this person or that person isn't paying attention to this or that.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. But again, it's a perspective thing, you know, like we've said that several times. It's a perspective thing. And until you get that perspective, until you choose to see it, you're not going to see it. And it's just going to be,
You're not. I mean, you know, stepping into a larger leadership role, when I say that, I mean like, you know, a division, a department, you have more people trying to, and it's not that you're trying to make everybody happy.
Right.
Right. Because I feel that some things nowadays, because there is no war, there's a lot of micromanaging going on. And there's things I'm like, I don't really think we need to be involved in that, you know? But the sense of purpose, essentially, for a lot of the younger people, I feel is not there right now because there is no war and they just feel like they're LARPing.
Right.
You know? And so it's very different for them. And trying to keep them on track, trying to keep them motivated and saying it'll come. Be careful what you wish for. It's going to come someday.
Right.
Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it's going to come. Trying to keep people motivated, and then also, you know, dealing with whatever issue a team chief might have with someone or something that's going in your department, or, you know, whether you're, I don't know, acting CMC or something where sometimes things are just over your head that you're like, okay, I can't handle, you know, it's not that you can handle it, I can't do it. It's out of my swim lane.
Yep.
But that's the hardships of being a leader that I think a lot of people don't realize, is that it's a very personal thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And it can take a toll.
Yep.
It can take a toll.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've heard stories and been in positions where, you know, somebody didn't go to a family funeral because they were in a leadership position. And then on deployment, they're working out, getting someone to come out so that one of their guys can go. And again, a lot of times people don't even know that stuff happens.
Yeah.
And it is, sometimes it's for a reason too.
And every scenario is different.
Yeah.
You know, where you have someone was sent home from one of our deployments for their wife's childbirth because, you know, there was something wrong with the child.
Mm-hmm.
They thought there was going to be something wrong, and luckily there was not, right? And then next deployment, someone else wanted to go home, and they're like, no. And then they're like, well, you know, this guy got to go home. And so I had a scenario like that when I was team chief for my deployment. And, you know, we had to send a guy home. And at first, you know, I called back to the command. And I was like, hey, this guy wants to go home. Here's what's happening. And the command was like, no.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And then, unfortunately, things got a little worse. And I was like, okay. And I was like, he needs to go home because A, B, and C. And they're like, oh, shit. And they're like, okay, now he can go home. You know, and it's just, and it can be stressful.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it definitely makes you wish. I know I've talked to, you know, I've talked to you and talked to plenty of other people and, you know, chief, senior master chief, all up and down too. And especially on the officer side too, where like, man, I missed that first and second platoon.
Oh, yeah.
When I was just getting yelled at and I was on the robot
Yeah.
and I was having the best time of my life, you know, you're like, the responsibility ended at the end of the workday and I went home
That was it.
and I just had a good time.
No, I didn't like the way you put the demo in the truck. I'm like, okay, I'll redo it. And that was it, you know?
Yeah.
Not the, why isn't your so-and-so's DTS in or their credit card or like, I don't know, just something that you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. Exactly.
And kids take it out of you too.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Oh, my goodness. I did not understand. The best thing I did, and this is going to sound totally wrong, but I'm just going to say it.
I'm
But
probably going to agree with you.
the best thing I did was not get married and have kids until after I'd really gotten into EOD. Because,
100%.
like, I look at some of the dudes who come in and already have a wife and kids going through EOD school, and I'm like, I don't know how you're doing it, man. Like, that is what seems impossible to me.
Right.
Like, it's tough.
I would put it this way. So I came back from maternity leave, and as hard as it was to like put my children in daycare, because there's a lot of judgment out there with mothers like, oh, you're going back to work, and you're like, okay, well, I have to. I'm active duty, and yes, I made the choice to have a family and be on active duty. But it was there was also some joy coming back to work. And I don't care who, like, I was like, okay, like, here's my day. Like it was, some of it was a lot easier. Coming back to work. You know, it was a known where having and it's funny because everyone's like, but you're a mom and you're a woman and this should be natural to you. And, you know, how dare you say these things about your child? I love my children. You kidding me? I'd do anything with my children. But it is hard. That is a completely different world. And, you know, going from workup to workup to workup to workup to, okay, now you're on shore duty. Hey, let's get pregnant. It was very, you know, I don't have any regrets, but I look back now and I'm like, man, I never gave myself time to decompress from, you know, all of the workups to then getting used to shore duty to, you know, let's throw a kid in there. And then, you know, all the awesome hormones and come with it, you know, and then being in this community and being pregnant is like, oh, you're getting fat. And I'm like, I'm a pregnant asshole, you know? So yeah, it was, they're like, oh, what's going on, man? And I'm like, I'm pregnant. And they're like, oh, hey, congrats. Thought you were letting yourself go. I'm like, dude, like, it's a little obvious. Like, come on, you know? So
I think, and this is only thinking, I don't know it yet, and I may change my opinion when I actually get there.
Do you want me to do my classic, like, sit back and...
No, I think I could be a stay-at-home dad once they're like middle school.
What would you need to be stay-at-home dad for then?
I don't know.
You're in school.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. I know I couldn't do it before, like, maybe grammar school, but even that, like, I don't know. Definitely not before then. When it's 100% of the time, I see what my wife is doing, and she's looking at going back to work too. For, you know, you just don't, you don't have time to yourself. Ever, no, you know, and
no, you don't. And you know, the thing is, at work, you can come home and you can turn it off, right?
Yep.
You don't have to take, I mean, you should, but you don't have to reply to that group text message about people just making jokes, or you don't have to, you know, and everyone will always say, well, like, you know, Navy never shuts off, blah, blah, blah. You know, parenting never shuts off.
Right.
You know, you could be at work and you get the phone call from school, you know, or you get a phone call from your spouse saying, hey, this just happened, you know, parenting. And then, like you said earlier, not deploying as a parent, you know, that brings in a whole different aspect of deploying. And, and like I said earlier, you know, compartmentalizing is huge. To survive, you have to compartmentalize.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I know just from the, you know, husband, father perspective, deploying, or even just going TAD for more than a couple weeks at a time. It's, you have to you have to compartmentalize when you go, and yet it always sneaks back in there, you
100%.
know? And yeah, I'm like, if I didn't have kids, I would probably just go until the Navy kicked me out, because
Right.
why not? But I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm looking at my kids and I'm like, man, even though I didn't deploy as much as I thought, I've got.
It's a lot to ask to leave your children for 6 to 7 months.
It is, yeah. I've got six deployments now. I'll have probably 7 before I retire. And, my oldest, I've been gone a lot of his life, but just like you said, he's only about 7 now. So there's still I can still be there for a lot of it,
Yes.
which is cool to think and be like, okay, well, if I can, why, maybe I should,
Right.
Get some of that back. And I enjoy hanging out, right? It's weird though, because I also enjoy doing this EOD thing,
Right.
So it's
No, it is. It's unless you do it, I don't think people could understand.
agreed. I didn't before I was in both sides. Yeah, I didn't at all. And yeah, it was weird to me that like why wouldn't you just keep staying here and studying pubs?
Right.
Like, what do you mean your wife wants you home? What do you
Right.
mean you're going to do something? Like, why can't you come out on a Friday night?
It was funny because after having my child, so there was a shift in work habits for me, and dropping them off at daycare, or just one at the time, dropping off at daycare, and then coming to work, and then leaving to go pick up daycare. And I remember one of my leaders, Master Chief said to me, he's like, "Yeah, you used to be like the first one here and the last one to leave, and now you're like last one here and the first one to leave." I'm like, "Yeah, dude. Like, I have a kid."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, why don't you have I was like, "My wife go do it?" And he was like, "Oh shit." And it was literally what he was like, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
So it was quite funny.
Yeah.
Yep. So there you go, buddy.
Yep. And that's why.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Now that, because you just recently retired.
Yeah, I retired a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. How's that feel? Has it sunk in yet?
It hasn't sunk in yet.
Okay.
I feel like I'm on leave.
Yeah.
So, like I said, August 21st. When they're gone, maybe it'll sink in. But yeah, give it a couple weeks, couple days or months, and let's see how it. But I miss the circus, not the clowns.
Yeah.
I guess is a
I like that.
good
Yeah.
way of putting it. The higher you get, like we were talking about earlier, the more political things could get, or just personal stuff that you deal with as a leader, like helping people with their personal things. And it's not that you don't enjoy helping it, but it takes you away from the operating, and you're reading those emails and you're replying to those emails, and you're just like, I just want to go outside and watch a drill.
Yeah.
So when they're like, "Hey, we're gonna do this drill," I'm like, "Let's do it," So that will be missed.
Yeah.
That is missed, but not the other stuff.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. The
Yeah, absolutely.
first, second teams.
Yeah.
Yes, not the stuff of like sitting there and replying to an email about so and so's government credit card, or
Right.
this eval. I didn't like the way this eval was written. Can you change your verbiage on the eval? You're like, oh my god. So that stuff I won't miss.
Exactly. And that I feel like everybody can agree with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any plans?
Yeah. So we like to travel. That
Yeah.
was my hobby. That was my outlet. And so we're going to travel.
Nice.
We're going to, my kids have somewhat been all over. I mean, they've been through the Panama Canal. They've been to England, France, Spain. I mean, we love to travel. And so I have a lot of travel on the books.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, I decided about a year ago to get involved with a travel agency. And so I started planning vacations for people. And I enjoy talking about travel, booking travel, And that's what I'm going to be doing. It's an awesome job. I get to be home working in my office at home, and I can, talk to people about what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I love it. My husband's like, damn it, because now my bucket list is getting longer.
Yeah.
When you talk to different people, you learn about some places you would never even think of. And now you're like, oh, well, got to do that now, So, hey, babe, we put this on the list, put it on the tab. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to help plan vacations. And
that's awesome.
It's not the typical going in and doing what some people do after they retire out of the community, but I wanted to step away, and I wanted a job that I could be at home, be there for my children when they need it, and still do something. I couldn't just do nothing.
Yeah.
I know some people are like, oh, I'll give it a year. And I completely did the opposite. I started doing this last year.
Yeah.
And so I've been enjoying it. I've learned all about cruising and river cruising and the Mecca for family, Disney, Europe. The only market that I really haven't tapped into for planning is planning anything over in Asia.
Okay.
Just because that I spent a small amount of time there when I was on the ship, and I've spent more time in Europe, so it's just easier to talk about Europe and stuff like that. And so if you would like to book a vacation, just go ahead and send an email.
Excellent. Yeah. And if depending on if you don't have a website for it yet,
I don't have a website for it yet. No. So I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook. Mostly through Instagram, and then word of mouth. A lot of the guys, I've talked to a lot of guys at a couple of Moby units, booked some vacations for them.
Yeah. I'll put a thing down in the description. I try and do that for anybody that comes on, like real estate agents or anybody that has anything that they're doing. And then for anybody listening, if you don't have Tara's contact, just reach out to me and I'll have her reach out to you. So
that'd be great. And just something like a nice little plug is that a lot of people think that it costs money to have a travel advisor, and some do. I don't. I do we sit down, we talk, you tell me what your dream vacation is. I can, give you, unless you're pretty specific and you're like, hey, this is where I want to go and this is when I want to go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, boom, there it is. Or if you're like, oh, I think I want to do this or this, then I come back with a couple options and you can agree to it or you can not agree, and there's no fee. But yeah, it's fun. It's a great escape.
Yeah.
So
I have seen before I even knew that you were doing that, I saw your Instagram blowing up with like a cruise that seemed like every other day.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so jealous right now. Like, that's awesome though.
So I have to say this. We have sailed Disney just because of the age of our children.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I'm like, I know that when they get older, we won't cruise as much. We'll start doing more land. But for the age of our children right now, and to actually experience a real vacation, because, when you pack up your truck and you drive somewhere and you land, and you're at your parents or you're at, the beach and you're cooking every night or you're cleaning up or you're cleaning a diaper isn't really a vacation, So what I enjoyed about cruising was you have a room, someone cleans it for you. You go to dinner every night, someone cooks for you. You come back and your room is tidy. Yeah. There's kids sections where you can drop the kids off and then you and your spouse can go and have some adult time. And then there's family activities. And you know where you're sleeping every night. You know where you're eating every night. And the only thing you have to worry about is, what are we going to do when we get off the boat?
Yeah.
So to us, it was an ideal way to actually relax on a vacation as opposed to other things. And that's why we like doing it. And the kids love it. I mean, no, my kids aren't going to remember that they were on the beaches of Normandy, but I was, and they were there. And it's just, it's amazing where you can go.
Yeah. It's funny. You bring that up, and I saw something not too long ago, and it said, parents don't have vacations. They just take their kids to different places to raise them.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And you know, we catch a lot of flack like, well, why do you take them? They're not going to remember. And I'm like, well, you know, who cares if they don't remember? We remember, and it's fun. It's something new and exciting. Like, you know, I have this little saved folder on my phone, and it's all the countries in the world that my daughter has eaten ice cream.
Oh,
you know,
yeah?
because I swear, like, that girl will find an ice cream shop in a desert, you know, because we were walking by. She's like, I want ice cream. I'm like, there's no ice cream. She's like, right there. Or like gelato or whatever. And you're just like, damn. Like, and so I just started doing this little memory of all the places like Mexico, Grand Cayman, you know, France, England, Spain. It's just
awesome.
funny, you know, the Azores, you know, like there we are. I just have this little book of her just eating ice, and now it's become our little tradition of like, okay, we got to stop and get some ice cream so we can have our, you know, we're just developing our own little funny traditions, and it works.
That's cool.
Know? Yeah, it is. It's a good time. It's and there's stress with it. Don't get me wrong. What vacation doesn't have stress? But I think it goes back to what you said earlier. I want my children to know that there's more to the world. Yeah. And something that I was brought up with was you don't have to like someone's culture, you know, but you should respect their culture because it is their culture. And so I want my children to experience different things. And, you know, we have my 4-year-old, she has a friend from Switzerland now. You know, we've met awesome. People from all over, and now they're like text pals, you know. Right? Yeah. We want pen pals. Right. No. So why did you do that? Yeah. So they're, you know, how's it going? How's she doing? How are you doing? You know, and then my son has a friend who lives in Seattle, and it's just stuff like that. It's like, hey, why not go out and experience some things and do it? And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Right. So that was our, that just became an outlet. I was like, we're doing this. Yeah. That's awesome. Of course, we did the Panama Canal one during COVID, right? When day Mom of the Year here. The day we went through the Panama Canal was the day that COVID was declared a world pandemic, a global pandemic. And I was like, perfect timing. Yeah. So, you know, there's that. Yeah. But survived. Yeah. That's pretty cool. So if you want to travel, reach out. I'm more than happy to help. Yeah. And I'll let you know right away if it's something that is not in my wheelhouse. Yeah. So. Cool. I will actually definitely be reaching out. My wife has been asking me to go on a cruise since we've been married. Actually, probably think since before we've been married. Yeah. And I'm a terrible husband, but You're not a terrible husband. I'm finally giving in. And not because... we're compromising. Well, I'm actually not even compromising. I'm actually coming to the point where I'm like, yeah, I could see that for all the reasons that you said for the cruise. Because as I look at the things, last summer, we have a travel trailer, and we literally drove the travel trailer from here to Montana. Okay. And then down to Salt Lake City and back. I've never been to Montana. In a month. To go. It is beautiful. I've heard. There's no cruises there, but it's still beautiful. But that was exhausting. Like, I'm sure. It was a great time, but it was exhausting. You need a vacation from your vacation. Right. Yeah. And I'm actually, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, I could be down to be, you know, I'm a manly man, but I'm going to say it. I can be down to be pampered. You know, go on a cruise ship and just. It's funny because I have people come to me and they're like, should I do Disney World or Disneyland or Disney Cruise? And I'm like, well, do you want like stress and lots of people? Because you know how everybody in this community loves crowds. Right. And they're like, no. And I'm like, or do you want to relax and throw your kids in the kids club and maybe do you for a couple of hours and have some drinks? They're like, that sounds like it. I'm like, here you go. Yeah. That's awesome. But yeah, no, working on a quote right now for someone who wants to go to Estonia. Oh. And I've never been to Estonia, but I'm learning a lot about it. That's awesome. It's interesting. Some of these places that, you know, you just don't think about. Yeah. Or not, you know, you're more popular. You know, it's not like the Italy or the Ireland. Right. You know, but yeah, it's a good time. That's pretty cool. So, yeah, thanks. I like it. Sounds like you're going to be pretty busy. I hope so. With a reasonable amount of busy. Yes, yeah. A reasonable amount of busy. Is there anything, as we kind of like close out, something I'd like to ask? If you don't have anything, that's fine. But is there anything that you would either want to
give to anybody listening, or specifically the EOD techs listening?
For EOD techs, I would say for the newer generation, like I said earlier, your time will come. It's going to happen, and it might not be today, and it might not, it'll happen. It'll stay patient, because the training that you get now, especially some of these schools that are available now, it's truly amazing. And be patient, and know that unfortunately you can't always get yes.
Right.
You can't always have yes. But sometimes people mean it with the best intentions of, there is, that's how I always put it to me, is like, when you're, the new guy, you have you see this much. And then when you're the LPO, you see much. And then the senior chief, the chief, team chiefs, you see this much. And then obviously I was never a CMC. I just did acting CMC, but you see a lot more. And so just remember, as, you grow into the community and you get that rank that you want. Rank is fantastic, but the responsibility also comes with the rank. And so just remember that maybe someone said no to you, and it's not that they wanted to say no. It's just maybe there's other things that are going on that you don't know about.
Right.
And to enjoy it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Even the bad times, even the 2:00 in the morning, -4 below at China Lake doing a chem drill. It sucks, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Have fun with it, and it's like any, you gotta just smile and have fun with it.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. It's just, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely.
It only makes you stronger. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, just enjoy it. But thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. I was super pumped that you agreed to it.
There was some nervousness. I have no problem saying that.
Yeah. I totally understand. Thank you for listening to the Echo Oscar Delta podcast, where we talk to Navy EOD techs and hear the stories that they want to share.